Doctor Who is back. We've finally well and truly entered the second era of Russell T Davies with The Star Beast, first of the 60th anniversary specials reuniting David Tennant and Catherine Tate. It's the true and proper beginning and first real episode of this new era of the show. Not even really the fourth era of the revived series so much as an entirely new era unto itself, given how Russell, the BBC, and Disney are positioning it. An adaptation of a 1984 Doctor comic beloved by RTD and David Tennant, The Star Beast is the first of 3 hours preceding Ncuti Gatwa taking over as the 15th Doctor. So this is something of a liminal phase before his first season begins. It's also, of course, an anniversary special, so there's lots of reflecting and celebrating of the past. And at this length, it's a bit of a mini-series, so there's a lot of character work in this first hour to set up things to further explore over the next 2 hours, presumably. There's also an absolute wealth, a mountain, really, of behind-the-scenes content available with the episode. Russell has been vaunting Doctor Who as the most covered show in the world in terms of behind-the-scenes content, which I know I've absorbed all of. It's over 2 hours of different video extras, and the novelisation as well, and I imagine you two probably aren't that far behind me, so we'll be getting into all that as well, but let's start with the episode itself. Diving will be myself, Neo from Australia, along with Ingiga from England, and Missy from New Zealand. I firstly want to ask you two a slightly intangible question, but one that I think pretty much everyone that's seen the episode is kind of talking about. How did this episode make you feel?
Happy. It made me feel happy, and I think a little relieved, and sort of just excited and reinvigorated my interest in this lovely television show.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I would say it felt warm, kind of tingly. I laughed plenty. I was smiling a lot at a lot of the various things going on. And it was nice to be really engaged, because I felt it was a script that, well, it's the kind of script you expect, really, where everything basically has a purpose. And it's working a lot behind the scenes to actually make little things important. And there are lots of snappy bits of dialogue, and I wouldn't go as far as say it just works, because maybe it's not quite that kind of script, but a lot of it does work, and it feels like there is a solid, coherent internal vision for the show, which is very, very endearing.
Yeah, I cheered, I shouted, I fist pumped the air. It was reinvigorating. I like that term for it. It felt like a burst of, it's not just a burst of energy and excitement. Like, I felt all that, but what really struck me the most, and I'm not trying to get too comparative here, was the warmth. There was love in this. There was love between the characters. There was love just bursting out of everything going on here. I felt real humanity and emotion. And not everything worked in this for me. I think we'll probably all have little quibbles, well, maybe big quibbles even. But I never felt at a distance. I never felt a coldness or an artifice. I always felt a wealth of energy and warmth and heart. And I think that was really, 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 I welcome that. That felt really, really good to me.
Yeah, I think it's particularly important to have something like the relationship between the Doctor and Donna as the spine of things, as well as all of the little relationships between the members of Donna's family as well, because all of those just... I've heard it said that sometimes that TV is about family, and I think just having things like that as the spine of this episode just allows a completely solid base for everything else to go on top of. So even if other stuff kind of flops or doesn't work or isn't as good, just having that love, I think, at the centre of things, and having like a really dramatically rich bond like that between Donna and the Doctor means you're basically good to go. Yeah, I think that it could have gotten a lot more wrong and still been fundamentally workable.
I hate to sound like everybody else, but I was really blown away, and I shouldn't have been. I should have expected this, but Catherine Tate was just an absolute phenomenon in this episode. David Tennant and Jacqueline King were both also absolutely amazing. They really knocked my socks off, but Catherine Tate was just channeling so much and at such different energies and with such force. It felt like something the show hadn't had for a long time. It really blew me away, the power and the energy and the emotion she brought to everything. And Tennant and King were fantastic along those same sorts of lines as well, but she just rocked the world here.
Yeah, she has the biggest job in this episode, doesn't she? Like, she has to go through so many phases, and she starts off not knowing who the Doctor is. We're seeing essentially a whole new side of her with this new family that she's created around herself. And then we get her, like, gradually over the course of the episode, starting to, be uncomfortable with these things burgeoning and starting to realise what's going on. And finally, of course, we get the grand reveal where the Metacrisis Donna has returned and she gets to explode in the Doctor's face brilliantly. It's just such a wonderful arc. It was just so amazing to see.
Catherine Dent was amazing, and she was very much the linchpin of the episode. It all revolved around her, and she had to make it work, and she really did. And I loved seeing all the different sides of her. And I loved, there was a lot of discussion on like how, oh, David's coming back as the Doctor. How's he going to play it? Is it going to be like 10? Is it going to be different? But I also, like, I don't know if any of us were expecting to really engage with how much Donna had changed and how a slightly different Donna was being played. But it was so interesting and so just wonderful. Yeah, I loved it.
I want to get into the 10-14 distinction later, but that's such a fanish thing that can wait until we talk about more important things. You both kind of characterize Donna as like the linchpin or, the main part of the episode there. And I kind of agree. I think functionally, maybe not exactly in how we got it, but just at like on the bones of the story level, Rose kind of feels like the active, maybe not outright protagonist, but I feel like her role in the episode drives a lot of the events in a way that isn't really the case for the other characters, including the Doctor and Donna. What do you think of that? Do you agree? What do you think of Rose's place in the episode?
I feel like if you read a synopsis of the episode or someone relayed it to you, you could make a very convincing argument for Rose to be the protagonist. Like, she's the reason Donna is in Camden and bumps into the Doctor. She meets the Meep. And of course, there's the big Metacrisis-y thing that we'll get to in due course. But as like watching the actual episode, she's just not present enough in the narrative for that to be the case. The scenes with her are sort of disparate, and even when there are scenes featuring her, they don't feel like big important-y plotty scenes. So it's a weird thing. She's the catalyst for a lot of the story, but she doesn't feel very involved in it until right at the very end.
I was going to say that's exactly the right way to put it. Like, she's in the role that would normally be a kind of protagonist role, but I think partly because the story is actually mainly focused about the Doctor and Donna, because that's what it's really about. I think Rose's role ends up being adjacent in a way that if this was a completely new show, it was just about like these similar sort of setup with these similar sort of characters, it would be focused on Rose. It would be about Rose, but it's kind of not. So Rose ends up being kind of, I don't want to say like a device for like Donna's like storyline, but she's sort of, she's there to almost echo stuff with Donna and the Doctor in a way, rather than truly be like at the center of things, like guiding the narrative. She's sort of like she's adjacent.
I think there's a production thing I think is worth clarifying, because I see a lot of people talk at different directions with this. The 60th anniversaries are on Disney+. The 60th anniversaries were made months before the Disney Plus deal became public, and Disney, committed to season 1, / series 14, if you want to be old school, I guess, and all that started infusing in with Shooty and what's to come there. The 60th anniversaries came from after the show left BBC Studios with Chris Chibnall and, those before him, I guess including this man, and moved into Bad Wolf, who's run by RTD's old friends that helped make RTD1. So the 60th anniversary, in so many senses, they're liminal, but they're liminal in a production way as well. This is before Disney. These are the Bad Wolf, specials, and then, that's been parlayed into the whole big Disney deal. So there's production stuff here. I'm just curious how the production worked in comparison to how the later productions, are going to work. Obviously, there's different money at play here. You can see from the episode. I mean, those crane shots in the Wrarth sequence. I think, Missy, you weren't as, what's the word, enraptured by those scenes as I was.
Oh, I was enraptured at first, and the crane shots were great. But maybe not all of it.
There's a lot of money and resources here, but we're not quite in Disney phase yet, for whatever it's worth. What I'm kind of swirling around here is the episode is about 3 minutes shy of an hour, and this is the first episode they put together as part of this new era. And now, they're off doing season 2 of Shooty and everything, so I assume they're pretty well oiled by now. I'm kind of dancing around. This episode is not a mess, I would say, at all. And I think, at least for the first 2/3, it flows without, any real issue. But I'm curious, I feel like a lot of the stuff to do with Rose, and maybe other things that is harder to tell, feels kind of abbreviated in ways that I find confusing. And I think that's kind of what we're playing around with here. And I wonder, was there a subplot they realized didn't work writing-wise? Was there like a resource thing that ended up having issues, or are we reading too much into it and are sloppy with some things, or we perceive them to be sloppy with some things, and this was actually the intention all along?
I would just say I don't think it's I don't think we're necessarily reading too much into it to suggest that this episode feels unbalanced. Like, particularly at the climax, it feels like it's gesturing back to something that wasn't quite there earlier on in a couple of places. So it does feel like it's been snipped, like editing wise, in some ways that make it feel a little bit incoherent in certain scenes.
Firstly, just so to prove that obviously, like, there are cut scenes from this. I'm not saying this is like an insane, like Zack Snyder scenario, but like any, like so much TV, obviously there's going to be stuff that gets cut or moved around or changed or whatever. There's a little brief bit here from the InVision commentary with Tennant and two producers, which says the climax things got changed a little bit there.
So this is all pretty epic stuff now.
Just thinking about what was cut, it was longer to get to this, wasn't it? There were more scenes cutting back and forth, I think, before the glass wall came down.
We've run out of...
Do you know what? I can't remember that really now. I can't think what they were. I mean, maybe there was a bigger... Oh, I know. There was much more in... there was much more with Fudge and Donna's street, I think, definitely.
Right.
I think we felt that the flames were spreading so quickly that the whole world would have exploded. The timing just didn't quite work, so that's why we speeded it up.
Yeah.
That's the producers and Tennant talking about in the climax where the roads are getting split and the Meep's evil plan is afoot, and Tennant and the 14th Doctor and Donna are trying to sort out the issue. That some stuff got changed there. I kind of wish more stuff got changed there because I don't love the resolution of the road thing. But that's just kind of evincing things got changed, which is totally normal. That happens in loads of episodes. But I'm not crazy saying some stuff might have gotten shifted, right? Do you have any deeper thoughts on that, or is that clip just going to serve as, things got cut?
I like to have Phil Collinson not remembering what he'd cut. Just sort of I can't really remember. I'm sure it was a fairly long time ago at that point, but it's ever so convenient. This is why we need the complete histories back to find out what exactly was changed at every single stage, because we can't trust the producers anymore, right?
Oh, that was amazing the other day when we were going through the complete history for the Celestial Toymaker from the 60s, and that was insanely honest, maybe too honest about things that went wrong. So I agree. I would love to know. I mean, most things went right here, but it's always interesting to know what went a little bit wonky. Anyway, that was just kind of the build up to the clip from that InVision commentary, which I think pertains more to what we're talking about, which is some of the Rose stuff sits oddly in the episode, purely in terms of the functional mechanics of the plot we're talking about here. Actually, should we clarify that now? I think Rose is a fantastic idea for a character, and I think that I think that's brilliant what RTD did there. I think it suits Donna's characterization so well to make her this lioness, protective of a trans daughter, and I think it suits Sylvia's progression so well from how Tennant, the 10th Doctor, talked to her at the end of Journey's End about trying to you're not being the kindest matriarch in the world. Maybe you should fix that. I think. Man, I'm really characterizing Rose as a device there, aren't I? She works so well for Donna and Sylvia's characterization. But I'm saying, I think this is so RTD, and it's beautiful to start off his era with a big, here's a trans character who's the daughter of your beloved character, and we all love and support her. This is fantastic. I think that's great. I love that.
I love it too, and I think it's such a wonderful idea to be like, this is our big new, bringing Doctor Who back to the masses, putting it on Disney Plus, and then centering it around the story of a young trans girl, and that be in such a positive way.
It's so proud.
I think it's very lovely, and it's so proud and so just accepting and just wonderful. And I think for all the quibbles and issues that I have, and I do have, a lot of it falls to the wayside in light of that. I just think it's really lovely. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, and obviously, again, it works, like you said, for Lioness Donna and stuff, that brilliant line about how, Josie Wingate, she had lots of names at school, I should know, I invented them. That's a fantastic, quintessential Donna line that we can only really get, if Donna's in the position of, having a kid who is, being bullied, basically. But, even, just putting all that aside, I think I love RTD actually, pushing himself and actually, bothering to write this. Nonetheless, I don't want to be the whole, let's all wash a cisgender writer's balls for deigning to write a trans character, but it's great. It's great that he did it.
Also
the thing I find there is it's almost a tyranny of low expectations, isn't it? It's the fact he's written in a trans character and he's depicted her positively means we all need to I guess we feel so safe because we know what we think with each other. We have no There's no danger here of, someone's going to think something. So we feel so safe to talk about it in this kind of safe way of obviously we all support, that sort of thing, which is why we can dig into could it have been done better. It's an expression of love in a lot of ways. It's the opposite of an expression of disapproval. It's an expression that I think RTD would have, I hate to be like the Doctor wouldn't approve of what you're doing, but I feel like RTD would approve of this sort of thing because this is kind of what he often calls for. Is like, I changed my mind on things over time. That's, fans should be pushing forward. Everyone should be pushing forward. That's RTD. That's the big telos of RTD and Doctor Who and blah, 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 blah. It's not a problem to think, could things have been even better? That's why this character is kind of in the show in the first place, right?
Yeah.
All that said, the one thing that sits really weirdly for me with Rose in the episode is after the Metacrisis thing does I'm going to slightly contradict myself here. RTD doesn't generally double up concepts. That's a bad writing move to do. And I think RTD does some wonky writer moves sometimes, but he doesn't tend to do really amateurish, I'm just doubling up the same concept in the same episode sort of thing, which is really amateur writing, I think, because it's needless. Yet we get kind of two resolutions of the Metacrisis in the episode. We get the quantibly matrix, you had a daughter and therefore the Metacrisis spread over more than one individual and then she got it and so it's healthier for blah, blah, blah. That, I think, works. I'm not saying I necessarily love it, but I think emotionally that works. And it works, basically. And then he kind of resolves it again, but the Metacrisis could still kill them, but they let it go. I don't want to get fully into that yet, but when they let it go and the timey-wimey energy dissipates out of them, Rose has an interesting line. What's Rose's line there?
After all these years, I'm finally me. I think that's what she says.
Which is like a lovely thing to say. What's she talking about? There's a clip from Doctor Who Unleashed, the confidential replacement show, which kind of goes into that. It goes into a bit about the dead naming of Rose in the episode, and it goes into what the actress thinks is meant by finally me. I guess before we watch it, what do you guys think she means there?
I think that the closest thing I can get to is because of, as we, I guess, learned the Metacrisis in her head or whatever, she's felt something strange going on all these years, and now it's like gone or resolved, like she's reached equilibrium, so now she feels like fine now, I guess. But again, it just kind of comes off like a sci-fi magic Time Lord power thing.
That's basically what I thought too, that there was Metacrisis stuff in the back of her mind or whatever, and now she's free of it. I do, like when I very first watched it and that happened, I did think that this was a very, like my first reaction was like, oh, that is the most insane, weird, transgender thing. Like, that the Metacrisis was responsible for her being transgender, and that she was like fully transitioned via the Metacrisis leaving in a weird way, and I was like, that is crazy in the worst way. But thinking on it more, it feels like it's just like, because the problem with the like it being weird Metacrisis-y stuff and now she's free of it is that we don't get any of that in the episode. It's not like, oh, there's weird stuff in Rose's head. It's just,
I think what you're suggesting there is like, and it's I don't think RTD would ever do like a biological beat about a teenager. Well, actually, if anyone would, maybe, but it feels so not set up what the finally me thing means that I was confused and I thought of a couple of different things that it could have meant at that stage. So yeah.
I think, Missy, like how it kind of felt to you, maybe almost like it could have been like the Metacrisis that made her trans or whatever. When when 14 and Donna are having their big realization that Rose inherited the Metacrisis, one of the exchanges they have is like, we are binary, she is not. Binary, non-binary. There's that whole thing of like binary, non-binary, and again, that doesn't resolve into an argument really or a thesis, but it seems there almost to suggest that like Rose, has. Something about Rose's gender identity is like related to having inherited something from the Doctor, which is very strange, and that does not turn into a full-on like argument that's like proven or anything by the end of the episode. But then why is it there? It's one of those things that seems to not have like a center of gravity to like attach it to. It's just floating there and suggesting something that isn't ultimately carried through.
Yeah, and it's just arises as the result of taking these like very strange exclusively sci-fi concepts of regeneration and Metacrisis and directly connecting them to real lived personal experiences. Like gender and identity in that, and it just becomes messy.
Is that Chelsea Wingate's boy? Just leave it. Well, I'm going to tell her.
And those boys on bikes are watching Doctor Who. It's I hope they'll watch it and think, oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that. See, maybe that's wrong. It's true. That's a part of our audience. Yeah.
It's all my fault.
She's got a very supportive family and they accept her. And when she says, I'm finally me.
After all these years, I'm finally me.
She instantly runs to Donna and gives her a hug. And I think that as well, seeing that on screen. And so it's not just for the younger generation, it's for families and parents as well to know that it's kind of normalised, and it should be normalised to, you know, let your kid be free.
Two things there, really. RTD saying maybe this episode can teach teenage boys not to dead name teenage trans people. And then Yasmin's explanation, I'm finally me, like encouragement to let your kids be free.
I feel like that clip still doesn't actually explain the finally me thing. It seems to sort of like swerve around, like explaining like what is happening like for Rose there in particular. Like hugging Donna doesn't seem like unusual for Rose and Donna at all. Like, you know, Donna loves Rose, Rose loves her mum. Like, yeah, again, I think on the whole, like Donna's like utterly like unconditional love for Rose throughout the episode, that is shown throughout the episode, and that is like the big thing that is so good in terms of like just showing and just normalizing this like lovely relationship on screen. So I'm not sure what the finally me thing actually has to do with it. I'm just on the boys on bikes thing. Yeah, I think a little bit earlier in that same sequence in Unleashed, I think Yasmin Finney, Rose's actress, kind of describes how doing stuff like that and having like her character experiencing transphobic abuse kind of like touched on her PTSD a little bit, like kind of stuff that she'd actually gone through is kind of traumatic for her.
That whole thing with the boys running by on the bike.
It was that difficulty
and
to
dead
shoot.
naming. You know what? It did kind of bring back some PTSD for me. I think, you know, sadly, my high school experience was a lot of bullying and a lot of sort of defending myself and having to put on a brave face when I entered the school doors. And I think it didn't go too much into her bullying. It kind of just like grazed it a little bit, and it added a little bit of reality into Rose's life and what it's like to be a trans person. And I think we did it beautifully, and it wasn't too much, but it showed, you know, she's still struggling. I mean, she's amazing, but she still gets, you know, dead named, and yeah.
And it shows Donna as a lioness as well.
Oh,
as a
yeah,
defender.
absolutely.
I like that about it.
Yeah.
It shows that Rose is so safe in that family.
And I thought it was fascinating how watching Unleashed, how they replay the dead naming clip again, even after having like shown it in the episode. It's like, okay, really? You know, you've got the performer describing how this is like, you know, really fucking sensitive to you, and you're just sort of playing it through again, like, God, like, geez, can you like, you didn't actually, I don't know. So I think there's a risk of like, sort of overindulging in terms of showcasing like the traumatic, like the abuse and stuff. I think when it comes to stuff like this, do you find, I don't know, I feel like you can get a bit overly sort of indulgent with like making it a spectacle almost of the abuse that people go through. I'm not like being super like condemnatory here. It's just like a mild thing about Unleashed that kind of annoyed me.
No, and I get you because it's like I've seen lots of discussion in the press from RTD about the importance of showing stuff like that and how it's not like that is real life for very many trans people. And it sits in the episode and it has its purpose, and then in Unleashed to go back to it and ask Yasmin Finney about it and play the clip again, I guess you could argue the same thing.
We can move this up a notch because another marketing arm of the show dealt with this with another trans person related to Doctor Who, in that the official Doctor Who podcast, which is a new emanation from RTD2, which has 3 people on it who are known to us in various ways. There's Terrell, who's like a TikTok guy. He does like those TikTok 10 things you missed in Spider-Man trailer type stuff. And he's on the actual Doctor Who YouTube channel now. He's the one like recapping the Dr. Donna arc and that sort of stuff. And this is explaining Doctor Who, the Time Lord, snip, snap, you know, they live, then they die. So that's him. Then we have Crystal D, who on this channel we use a lot because she did 3 fantastic interviews with Stephen Moffat at the end of his run. And she used to run the fan show, which was like the precursor, I guess, to the official Doctor Who podcast. How would you describe the fan show? It was kind of a real didn't last that long, but it was a very specific thing in Doctor Who's history.
Yeah, it's really liminal thing, like not confidential really, but just kind of, I don't know, what even was it? Like, it was just Crystal doing random things. Yeah.
It was more than the regular web extras, but less than confidential, yeah. Like game showy games, but also occasionally actually like interesting interviews. It was an interesting little period of the show, it's tail end of the Capaldi era, and Crystal D was like the MVP there. So she's back. She's I don't think she was in fandom heaps during the Chibnall era, but she's back now. And then the one I find most interesting, because I've loved some of her Doctor Who work before, is Juno Dawson, who's an actual like writer. So she's on the official Doctor Who podcast, and it's all three of them, and it's a really weird format, this podcast. But I think any official podcast that isn't like partially hosted by an actual showrunner is kind of very weird in formatting. Like, I've heard a lot of them, and we talked about the Watchmen ones when we talked about the Watchmen show way back in 2019. Anyway, a lot of this podcast is them eating audibly into their microphones. When they're not eating, there are these very, very strange sequences, which are, they cut to RTD, and RTD is like these pre-filmed inserts where he says actually quite interesting things, and then he like gives them like a prompt to like discuss. But what do you guys think? This is just what an old fuddy-duddy like me thinks. What do you guys think? Which is really, what even is the right word for this?
Patronizing?
It's completely inorganic, isn't it? You're saying, so people hired through the marketing arm of the show who are doing marketing for these new episodes. Here is my opinion on a thing which maybe is slightly dodgy, maybe. What do you guys think? And like, what do you think? Like, that's not a question. That's a affirm that what I did was good. That's what that means. So there's a kind of weird bit where RTD is talking about the dead naming stuff again, and then he says, but what do you guys think, Juno? And like, it's over to you, Juno, trans person, to say, well, what do you think of what RTD said here?
Wow.
While we digest our tuna madras, let's once again hear from lead writer Russell T Davies.
So now, trigger warning for potentially contentious conversation, if you don't mind me leading myself into this, which is that of dead naming. Rose at one point is dead named in the street by some kids calling her by her dead name, which is Jason.
Right, Jason, you all right? Looking good, Jason. Right, give us a kiss, Jason.
Oh, get them. Is that Josie Wingate's boy?
Just leave it.
The interesting thing about Jason is actually it means healer or doctor, which means that Donna actually named her child after the doctor without realising it subconsciously, which is a nice fact to get in there, to get that across and to get the sort of prejudice that's being shown towards Rose by those bullies and thugs in the street. We actually have to have a scene of dead naming. So I'm kind of handing this over to you, Juno, really, in a way, which is to say, is that a good thing to do? Is that a wise thing to do? Is that a difficult thing to do? I personally think we should stare into difficult stuff like this, but equally, what a nice, easy life I've got, and I'm ready to be told otherwise. So what do you think?
So I feel that it is important to show the lived reality of trans people.
Leading up to that, RTD actually says this really interesting thing where, of course, Rose, having chosen her name Rose, is really fascinating because, like Tenet 14 reacts at the start of the episode, Rose, that's crazy to use that name. So obviously that's Dr. Donna. Rose was a big part of Doctor's life and a significant part of Donna's life too. But when they were born, the name Donna gave Rose was Jason. And in a kind of Moffat Series 6-esque fashion, RTD talks about, and Jason means healer, and doctor. So Donna named Rose after the doctor, and then Rose named herself after Rose. Like, that's a kind of interesting thing there. Anyway, he asks Juno, what do you think of the dead naming I did? Was it too much or whatever? It's just a similar kind of thing, isn't it, with these shows where I'm not at all invalidating them. Like, I 100% believe Yasmin Finney and Juno Dawson are believing what they're saying, 100%, totally. But it's just kind of a weird vibe to be like, this is what happened on the show, and I'm RTD. Trans people, what do you think? And then, they're going to say, yeah, we think it's good.
Yeah. Official promotion for the show is not a context where like anyone's going to be able to actually like give like a complete like nuanced, I guess, like critique, I guess, removed from the show of like what they think was going on in it or how it felt to do it. Like, it's just, there's always going to be something a bit like a bit smoothed out and neatened about it. So it's almost kind of unfair. Like, okay, one of our like 2 trans people on the team. What do you think? It's like, what can they say, really?
Kind of reminds me of our Davros discourse stuff about the Minnesota that preceded this episode, where I guess it's to give it's like the impression of monolith. Like in the show, you know, things related to trans people are presented this way, and then out of the show in the paratext, we've got trans people, actors and writers, you know, affirming it. And I guess a kind of function is to affirm, at least to maybe a lot of cis people who are, you know, less in tune with these ideas that, oh, well, this is all good. And I'm not saying it's bad in the slightest. I'm saying I can't say it's good or bad. It's not really for me to say. That's just kind of interesting. I guess that ties back to the low expectations thing we were talking about, where the mere existence of like positive trans messaging is kind of there to like get filtered through the marketing arms of the show. This is the only way, you know, it is. And so this is all positive and perfect, how it's all been done, which I get as a kind of inoculation against the actual bigotry out there. But also, it kind of feels constrained in a way, I suppose. But, you know, this is where fandom comes in, like conversations like these. This is the space for that. Whereas, you know, official marketing cannot be the space for that. That's why official podcasts, I think, aren't great, because the only good thing about them really is the proximity to the actual show. So the good thing about them is that they can interview the actual showrunner, they can interview actual writers, they can do stuff like that. In every other way, though, they're kind of constrained more than a regular fan podcast, even like the cheapest ones you can find, because they can't really say anything. You could even see in that official podcast at points, I notice some of them aren't talking about certain things that other ones bring up. And that's kind of more interesting to me, because I'm thinking, well, what are they? I'm genuinely interested in Juno Dawson's opinions as a writer on, you know, plot things to do in the episode, because I think she's quite a good writer. So
this is kind of back to like Rose and Unleashed and stuff, and like that whole thing with like, because there's a bit in Unleashed in that like in that clip we just saw where RTD is sat next to Yasmin Finney and talking about stuff. There's a bit I think slightly earlier on when RTD actually says it actually becomes a vital part of the plot that Rose contains the he and the she and the neither and the both. And that's a new future and stuff. Like Rose goes beyond words, beyond definitions.
But not just representation for representation's sake either, Russell. Rose is a character. There's a lot more going on there than...
Absolutely. It becomes a vital part of the plot that Rose contains the he and the she and the neither and the both. Yeah. And that's a new future. Rose goes beyond words, beyond definitions.
And it's like he's trying to describe Rose as a sort of like transness is her superpower almost. And like, do you agree? Do you say it actually is a vital part of the plot that Rose contains the he and the she and the neither and the both?
No.
No, exactly.
It's a vital part it's vital that she's Donna's daughter. The trans stuff feels, Missy might totally disagree, but to me the trans stuff feels like adjacent. I think piggybacking is the wrong word, but in terms of the actual plot function, it's that she's Donna's daughter and that she has the Metacrisis, right? The non-binary function in the Metacrisis, I don't fully... So, is it that Rose is trans or non-binary even, as, you know, we learn later on? Does that mean she could take on like more of the Metacrisis than like a cis girl or cis boy could have? Because if not, I feel like it's her ancestry that's like the power there. And then the trans stuff feels like adjacent to me in that she is trans and we all love her in the episode. And so, you know, that's a big celebration of all that. And, you know, she gets so affirmed in her power and everything at the end that she's in Metacrisis and everything, which is just like a big overall character affirmation. But unless I was misunderstanding, I think it's that she's Donna's daughter is the plot function, whereas the trans stuff is more like the general themes, like what the episode is trying to talk about.
That's actually a very good point. I didn't think of that. Because when we have that realization from 14, he says, like, too much power for one person, but you had a child and the Metacrisis passed down. And that's the answer. That's that, like, there's a line that's done. And then they talk about, there's the binary, non-binary moment. And then they talk about her choosing her own name, the shed, the toys and everything. And then it's kind of like, they're not connected. Those are two, like, separate bits of information that are, like, mixed together through that scene. And then we end with both, like, her being trans is the Metacrisis, when that's not where we began it, like, all just sort of, like, mixes up together.
Yeah, I mean, that little exchange between 14 and Donna when they're realizing it, like, it ends with, like, because the Doctor is male and female, and then it cuts to Rose and she's like, and neither, and more. And it's I don't know, something like that. Like, it does feel to me like, certainly what RTD wanted to envision here, Because especially in that quote from Unleashed that I talked about, he says like, well, you know, Rose contains all of this and that is the future and blah, 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 blah. I think what RTD really wanted to envision and found really endearing was this idea of presenting Rose and like her gender identity as like that being her superpower almost. Like this is what it would be like if like, you know, if being trans is like a superpower and that is like this incredible thing and the Metacrisis is like a metaphor for that or something like that, and I think that's maybe what he wanted to go for in potentially having this whole thing where like, you know, Rose being trans is somehow like a consequence of the Metacrisis, like her inheritance from the Doctor. And I think that is not tangibly in the final episode. I think it's plausible that there may have been more gesturing towards that was removed. And I think if that was, I don't want to get too much into speculation because we have no evidence, really. We don't have like concrete stuff for this. But like supposing something like that was there, I think it'd be the kind of thing that maybe you might want to remove, because I think it gets awkward if you start implying that someone's trans because of alien Time Lord magic. Because it's like, what the hell? Like that's really silly. No, like, trans people are they're just like anyone else. Like they have lives. They have normal lives. They have normal people. They're just people. Yeah, I think it's almost a flip side of like ultimately what like downtrodden groups, people who are abused, people who are discriminated against, what they want is to be seen as fully human, like everyone else is. You know, and I think sometimes the flip side is like when you go too far, you almost like put them on a pedestal. You make them out to be something alien or other, rather than what they really are. It's like you're just kind of going in the other direction, aren't you?
That links that we're talking very linky here right now, because the whole alien trans or very much alien non-binary equivocation stuff, it reminds me, Juno Dawson wrote in our Tortured Series 5, the audio dramas, there's this character called Orr who was not her idea, that was a Russell T Davies idea, but she wrote like the introductory story for, and Orr was like Torchwood's first, well, I don't know, in like the main line, but it's the audios. Is it main line? I don't know what you want to call it. In the TV show plus like the main audio seasons, Orr was like the first big non-binary character, and Orr joined like the Torchwood team, and Orr was this interesting, still is, you know, interesting part of Torchwood and everything. Juno Dawson wrote the first story for Orr, and I remember, Gig, you might even remember, or maybe you won't remember, years ago when we discussed Torchwood 5 on this channel, there was a lot of talk of like Orr is this very interesting character, and you know there's lots of cool stuff with Orr that works well on Torchwood, and it's cool to have like this non-binary representation. At the same time, there is this very common thing with non-binary representation, especially in genre fiction, especially sci-fi genre fiction, which is they're aliens. It's like we might love this character and we might portray them really positively, but it's just this constant kind of thing of non-binary equals they're an alien, or you know non-binaries from alien. Basically, we're humanizing them in terms of we're going to make them great characters and we're going to love the characters and they're going to be really interesting and warm people, but like they're not humans. It's kind of communicating the subtext there is a bit weird, basically. It's kind of I don't know if patronizing is the right word, but it's kind of a positive dehumanization. There's basically it's saying there's a conception here that we don't fully see as human, even though we love them, which is kind of a not ideal thing. And I guess that's what you're saying, what might have been an original idea for Rose. Or at least if it had emphasized more, is Rose trans because of the Metacrisis? Because like the lineage of the Doctor is male and female, or even just to be combined from a male 10 and a female Donna created it. But wait, that's how real life cis reproduction works, is from a male and female. So I don't know if that is that interesting thematically. Anyway, alien equivocation of Rose being trans, non-binary would be a weird thing to get hung up on. So I can see why if they had stressed that more, maybe like Gig is saying, maybe they pulled back a little bit there.
And I have to wonder if like it's entirely like possible that this was thought about by Russell, and just like the idea of this big, lovely, positive, trans-affirming narrative was, do you get what I mean? Like worth the sort of messiness of the alien-y stuff surrounding it, because we get that really lovely affirming climax where we have a young trans girl say, finally I'm me, and it's great, and it's wonderful representation, and it's going to be seen by millions of people all over on Disney Plus and everything. So even it's like, I think it's like possible that's where like the writing started with it. Like we want, that's what Russell wants, to have this great positive story for a trans girl, but then it just inherently got like all muddied, because that's what happens when you try and mix up real lived experience with sci-fi nonsense.
Rose is loved and accepted by her family. They're like even Sylvia's a nice person in this.
Oh, yeah.
And Rose also seems very confident throughout the episode. She handles the Meep very well. You know, she chooses to help the Meep. She hides the Meep, you know, from Donna. Like, she's being an active agent in like what she's doing. She talks to Fudge. You know, Rose, so she's loved and she's like a strong person. Like, she's very active in what she's doing in the plot. You know, it's horrible she gets dead named by the boys on the bikes. But I get there's no real struggle, I guess, running through the episode for her. So while I think it's great she doesn't have, you know, all these huge aggrieved experiences building up, it just makes the kind of culmination where she's like finally ring kind of weirdly, because it's like, well, what's being resolved there? Unless it's just meant to be like a slightly metatextual thing, isn't it great for a trans person to be happy and free like this? I guess like they're talking about Unleashed, which is great, but it's this kind of asynchrony with how much in the fiction are we here? It's not the hugest deal in the world. It's just there's so much to talk about in the episode that does work. These bits that kind of feel more, you can pick out more, kind of stand out, I guess.
Which does go back and make the boys on the bike scene feel sort of perfunctory. Because it would work even less if that wasn't there.
Yeah.
Shout out to during the non-binary sequence, the way they just cut to Rose and like there's a voiceover just overlaid with Rose's like internal monologue going, non-binary, and then they just cut away again. I love how, I mean, that's like the first time the word non-binary is even uttered, I think, isn't that random bit? Like, it's like a non sequitur when it comes in. Because you wouldn't actually, I guess, suppose, because with Rose kind of being like femme, like presenting for the whole like episode, you wouldn't like necessarily assume that Rose goes as like non-binary or she, they or anything. You might just assume she's just a she, her kind of character. So it's almost like it's just lobbed in there, like, oh, by the way, and it's almost like a word rather than like an actual concept that is dealt with in any sense. They don't really deal with the idea of what it means to be non-binary as a person. So like it's almost like, okay, well, why is that there? It feels like it's in there just more like a linguistic trick with the whole binary thing than as an actual like thing. So again, it's just that sense of slightly disjointed from an editing perspective, and like I think you just said, like the idea that it's referring back to stuff that isn't like quite there. So I think it's kind of annoying and a shame that like the first episode back, big trans storyline has this weird like sketchy like absence in it somewhere where it hasn't just come together.
Yeah, and if we're talking purely from like a sketchy editing perspective, I do feel the need to mention that how weird it was that was like such a close-up shot and like Yasmin Finney's not moving, and it feels very slapdash for the climax of the episode. It feels like in a similar way to the slapdashness of the opening shot, where it's like this feels like it should have had more effort put into it. It feels like something weird happened there. Same with the shed's the TARDIS, and we don't actually ever get a good shot of the shed other than in that. So the moment of realization isn't so much a aha, it's a oh, okay, if you say so. And I think that also muddies a lot of that scene, which I otherwise loved like a lot, but the evidence of her chose her own name, the shed, the toys, all feels less like a pieces clicking together and more like a okay, I'll take your word for it moment, which it didn't land as I think it should have.
Yeah, the rhythm of that scene is clearly a pieces clicking together moment, like you just said. Like it's clearly meant to be that kind of scene, and that kind of scene is the kind that you put after having built it up throughout the episode, which they didn't. They really didn't. And the shared TARDIS is like a perfect example of that. So yeah, it definitely feels like an episode that's got a bit missing from it.
You know what it reminds me of? Champion Sprinter.
Oh my god.
Where there's no foreshadowing for something, and then it's revealed as if it's the payoff to foreshadowing. We never see the shed TARDIS resemblance stuff, so I guess we see the toys. Like you could get that blue thing that looks kind of like a vestigial Dalek mutant thing, I guess. So yeah.
It'd be easy to assume the shed is just a family shed. Like, yeah, Rose uses the shed for her toys, but you know, it's not like she built the shed or like suggested anything like that has happened. So yeah, it's a bit strange.
You know what's really weird is I think when the Meep, there's that really lovely scene of the Meep holding the toys and trying to befriend them. The toy that the Meep is holding and the one that we see the most of is not in the clicking together pieces scene. Which is very strange.
With the binary thing, I think because the episode's aired and we've seen it and you know lots of people have seen it more than once, this is going to get more and more faded in how weird this aspect of it is. The binary thing, like Donna says binary in the episode, this all goes back to when Donna's having a breakdown in Journey's End and she's saying a bunch of fast words and technobabble, and she gets stuck on the word binary and she starts repeating herself like a record that's gotten stuck, and she goes binary, 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 binary. It is like the most insane thing in the world to 15 years later recontextualize that is like a beat about someone being trans, and that being like a superpowered conclusion to like a story arc about the villain from a 1980 comic. Like, this is one of the most insane things I can think of the show's ever done, is reframing the binary breakdown as like the build up to saying non-binary, as in like gender. I think that's just I love the madness of that. I think that's just such a bizarre thing to do.
Also the kind of thing I
very
think only
RTD
RTD
thing. Yeah.
Hive mind.
The only way it could have been better is if we did the same thing they did at the weather report at the start of the episode, and they had, you know, that terrible upscaled footage from Journey's End contrasting with like the really clear footage of Rose saying non-binary. That would have made it perfect for me. I was disappointed it was like a clear shot from 2022 of Donna saying binary, but whatever. If we're going to move on from Rose, but if we're going to stay in, hey, this was weird and it's to do with gender, there's another bit of the episode, I think more people have complained about this bit, which is, we've talked about there's a kind of doubling up. I mean, maybe people disagree with me or us here. I'd love to hear different takes on this, but I feel like there's a doubling up. The Metacrisis gets resolved through the shared inheritance. And I'm like, I know you guys hate the Journey's End mind wipe and Metacrisis stuff way more than I do. But I assume we're all like, okay, it's maybe not the cleanest or the most interesting resolution in the world, but hey, it was too much energy for one person, but then it went into two people. That kind of works. Like functionally, that like makes some sort of sense, right? Metacrisis lessened because it's spread over two people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cheat, but it's a cheat based on the fact that Donna like went on, had a life, had a family. So it's based on something positive. So I think it basically more or less works.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I like it. Even maybe better than I like Journey's End.
But then this weird doubling up. I hate this stuff in writing. It's like, so it's still wrapped around their cortex, 14 says. So they still have this Metacrisis energy and they're both going to die just later. Like, I guess how in Journey's End, Donna got to, you know, move around the Daleks and she was fine for like a couple of minutes. They got to drop Rose off with Meta 10 and then they got it like, I guess that was the idea in this episode was, yeah, Donna was fine for a bit because Rose had some of the Metacrisis energy, but now they're both going to zap because they both got the energy. That felt like I don't love that though, because it's like, we just had the emotional payoff of resolving the Metacrisis and then you're kind of doubling back, but going, actually, it's still an issue, which just feels like bad drama to me because it's like, but you just had the big resolution and now you're kind of walking it back to do another resolution. And then the second resolution I felt was more cryptic, what, you know, the Doctor hates, and it was more convoluted. And then of course it culminated in a weird gender line. Like, I'm basically just mystified by this whole instinct to... So the Star Beast episode undoes the Metacrisis to resolve it in a new way, and then it undoes its own resolution a couple of minutes later to redo and undo it. Like, I'm just really, really confused. What was the deal with that?
I think one big point of it is RTD can't just leave the Donna as the superpowered Dr. Donna, or Rose as the superpowered Dr. Rose. And, you know, as much as that's kind of lame, because, you know, I think we'd all love to see Donna having like the powers of the Doctor and having all these brilliant abilities and genius and stuff. But I think in terms of like how this two characters are actually written and how they work, I think RTD like wants to, for probably just for reasons of like simplicity and making it make sense and making it familiar, wants Donna to go back to being like the normal Donna and them having the usual Doctor companion dynamic. So Donna has to lose her superpowers again because we can't have this superpowered Donna. And like and also even like having Donna's child be superpowered like she briefly is at the climax of this episode, like RTD can't just leave that as it is either, because then it's like, well, Donna having a superpowered like Doctor child, that's going to have huge consequences.
New Adric.
So it's basically we have to a new Adric, yes. We have to bring back status quo by the end, and I think that's where the whole we still need to get rid of this Metacrisis thing comes from, ultimately, you know, as annoying as it is.
I wish they could have used their doctory, Time Lordy powers in like an Angels Take Manhattan way to revive the two deceased Wrarth warriors from earlier on.
Oh, that would have been nice.
Oh, I'd like that.
And then we could have ended on the best bit of the comic, or the second best bit of the comic, with the Sylvia and, you know, the Wrarth warriors having cake and stuff. That would have been my fan servicey dream.
Oh, that would have been brilliant. Oh my god, yes, that's such a good idea. They could have literally just given like the Metacrisis energy, whatever, to heal the Wrarths, and then they could have had cake. Oh my god, that is such a better ending. Wow, I'm mad now you suggested that to me.
Yeah, I haven't even read the comic, but I'm mad now.
Oh yeah, well, a little bit later we'll get into... Gig and I like the comic a lot, and like a lot of our favourite stuff was just...
gone. Yeah.
Missing in ways I thought RTD would jump at the chance to do, which was weird.
It sounds like I made the right decision to choose not to read it
to not read it first. Yeah. Okay. I can get functionally though that they have to get rid of the Time Lord power. That's fair enough. And I also can get thematically that they get rid of the power by just letting it go. I think that's really interesting in lots of ways because that's so linked into themes to do with the 10th Doctor. And so I guess kind of the 14th Doctor. I not getting into the gender nature of it yet, but I think that's interesting to have letting it go be a resolution to like a Series 4 Doctor thing, especially because so much of the show, the 10th Doctor era, and then followed up, especially in the 12th Doctor era, was about the Doctor learning, am I going to let things go? Can I let things go? What does it mean to let things go? I felt like it feels like you're playing with actual meat of the show there in an interesting way. But the frankly slightly mad thing there is it suggesting that in Journey's End, I saw one of our friends put this to us. Could Donna have released the energy in Journey's End? And did the 10th Doctor then even not know that could be done? Or was it just so inconceivable to him that someone would want to stop being like smart and amazing and brilliant and Time Lordy that he didn't even like offer that up as an option? I think, what do you guys think of that?
I think the broad suggestion that we get here is that maybe, certainly by the end of this episode, when the Dr. Donna is there with the Dr. Rose is there, as I just keep calling her now, when they're both together, they have more like knowledge and they're more advanced almost than the regular Doctor is. I think maybe that's supposed to be part of the suggestion. Like this is more than just a regular old Doctor or just a regular old Dr. Donna. This is something new and brilliant. So they know things that, plain old Doctor could never have understood. And that's why they have this brilliant ability to just release the Metacrisis that back in Series 4, the Doctor had no concept of how to do or how that would even work. And obviously Dr. Donna herself in that moment didn't know how to do either. Right. So I think it's a sense, I don't think it's necessarily strictly just a sense that it was just the Doctor being stupid. I think we could have avoided the whole memory wipe scenario all along. Because I think neither of them really knew. I think it's because of all this stuff that's happened that this releasing of it can now happen. I think that's the idea. I don't think RTD sets out to completely nullify what happened in Series 4 because I don't think that's really his instinct. But I think certainly there is meant to be a sense of maybe looking back on it a bit you don't get this, but now we have evolved, we do get it. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think the growth is the important part of that. I've seen people suggest that they can let it go because it's split between Rose and Donna. But whether it's that or what Gig just said or a secret third thing, I think it's important thematically that it couldn't have been done in Series 4 because of we needed this growth from Donna and we needed this growth from the Doctor that we can look back and say, oh, letting go, we can let go now. This is not a kind of thing that would have happened before, but our characters needed to grow and evolve and change and reach a point where we can let go. And that, because it just feels neater for the story.
Complicating that, of course, is the lines that we haven't talked about, which is where they tell the Doctor, it's a shame you're not a woman anymore, because she'd have understood. This is something a male-presenting Time Lord could never understand. So the idea that, in regenerating from 13 into 14, the Doctor is, lost the understanding of how this could possibly happen. 13 would have got this. And it's in terms of it's a weird, almost we're doing trans-inclusive gender essentialism now, which is fascinating. It's like a new an iteration on what Moff was doing. We're hitting new levels.
It is very Moffat-y. Yeah, it just this massive clang at the end of this really lovely scene. You're like, what? And I hate that it erases one of the few good parts of the Chibio, which is that the Doctor was a woman for a while. That's a wholly positive thing. But now it's no, back to male presenting, back to exclusively male. There's nothing feminine in your brain anymore.
It's such an unnecessary application of spite. Why? Stop it. Why'd you do this?
Yeah, it's also Rose's only snarky line of the episode. She's just a very lovely normal person, but then it's just very messy.
I've seen some people talk up how much this episode is seemingly in compensation with other eras of the show, like the Matt era, the Capaldi era, the Jodie era. And I feel like a little brief reference to how they look does not a deep conversation make. The way that Series 9, I think, is in conversation with Journey's End in some interesting ways. You guys might agree. I don't actually think this episode is. I don't think it is back to it. I thought so on my first watch, and then I watched it again, and I've grown more doubtful of how much it's actually in conversation here. Because Doctor, you would never understand letting it go, and Doctor, you're just a man, and we're women, and you're never going to get this. That's like a Chibnall era-esque did you watch Series 9 thing to me. Because the Capaldi era very blatant. I don't like Capaldi's last episode at all, but it's clanging in a very didactic way that, he learned to let it go. And that was kind of an arc over all his era. And there was a lot of equalizing gender stuff there. I don't disagree with some of the same themes playing around, but I don't feel like this episode is iterating on, or like even really recognizing what the Capaldi era, or at least Series 9 did there exactly. Like this resolution is like almost like it's sort of parodic in how much it's not syncing up with any of that. What do you guys think? Am I being too harsh?
No, I agree. I do feel like it feels regressive in its treatment of the Doctor. I think I said that this works, like that beat works after the 11th Doctor, after Matt Smith, but it just does not at all after either Capaldi or Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. So yeah, I can see the argument that, like, if someone wanted to say, oh, this is in conversation with Series 9 in the same way that Series 9 was in conversation with Series 4, I can see that, but I don't think it is. I do think it's just talking around similar ideas. It's not engaging with them in the same way. It just happens to be about similar things. And even then, it just actively goes against a lot of stuff in the Capaldi era.
Also, you know what it is? The ideas of, like, what does it mean to let something go or cling on to it, and the ideas of, like, a female counterpart to Doctor Who, those aren't Series 9 ideas. Those are the Series 4 ideas Series 9 was playing with, which means this episode's just in conversation with Series 4.
Yeah.
And in a way, this episode is almost like, by the end, this episode is almost put back in the box. The things that Series 9 kind of unleashed from the box. So Series 9, you get the whole setting up of, like, what if there was a female counterpart to the Doctor and she flew off and could be the Doctor? Well, at the end of this episode, we've got to make sure that, like, the Doctor Donna cannot, like, exist anymore.
Yeah.
The Metacrisis rules, and we can't have that. Yeah, we can have it for, like, 5 minutes, but no longer. I will say, if there is any, like, conversational-ishness with, I guess, with Series 9's, or what should I say, even, the whole thing where Donna kind of is a bit bitter at the fact that unconsciously she was trying to be like the Doctor in giving away all her money and stuff. This idea that this companion aspiring to be like the Doctor in ways that they kind of resent, or that maybe aren't kind of perfect, or like are just struggling maybe. That is sort of there. Again, I don't know if I'd go as far as calling it a conversation, but I mean, it at least feels a little bit, I don't know. I don't even know if I'd go as far as saying it's, like, obviously influenced by Moffat. 'Cause, I mean, obviously it's taking place after, and RTD obviously watched all of Moffat Who, which I don't know if I could say about his immediate predecessor. But it's still a bit tough to be able to say how in conversation it really is.
I think it's a lovely idea that it is, which is on my first watch, I just kind of soaked up, hey, some of these are the same ideas. Yay, we're actually past the Moffat era and everything's working now. I think because I wanted to feel that. And then when I watched the episode the second and third times, and I was more, it had blasted past me and I was thinking more about, everything that was going on, I kind of realized, wait, I wanted to feel that way. I'm not sure that actually holds up exactly. There were things I liked more on my second and third watches though, so hey, it's not all bad. Male presenting also, I find the phrasing, I don't find the words male presenting awkward in the sense that I think there's obviously sentences in the real world where that makes sense, but I find it feels like a kind of RTD wanted a certain line and that certain line couldn't really work in this episode.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because you can't call him a man outright because you've hinged part of the resolution on the Doctor's not just a man, but then you're like, but we've got to make, Rose and Donna have to have this thing that he doesn't have. How do we kind of hedge ourselves here? We'll call him male presenting, which is just kind of like, I feel like this beat is so close to not working that it's like, it's band-aiding it pretty hard.
It's fundamentally insane to use the language like male presenting in the line that's supposed to try to do gender essentialist humour.
Yeah.
The two things do not mesh. They are quite literally, the entire concept of being able to present as male rather than, some essence of you being male or whatever, completely undermines this whole gender essentialist dig that you're trying to get in at men and mannishness. So in a way that it just doesn't work. It does not work for me at all, I don't think.
Yeah. Also, while we're on this sort of topic of conversations with other eras, there's a 30-second clip.
She's safe. You saved her. I always wonder with Russell. He's very good at making things feel like they were planted.
His face come
back. All these bits of plot that are all now going to dovetail together so perfectly. Yeah. It feels like he's known them since 2005.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, he probably has.
Well,
You know, he probably has.
We'll never get a straight answer out of him.
No, you won't. He's had a long time walking around, working out how he would tell this story. I bet. I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm confused. Are Tennant and Phil Collinson actually suggesting there that Russell planned this back in 2008?
I think they're just talking out of their asses.
I think they're just complimenting Russell on being a good writer. I don't think they're properly thinking that oh, he definitely actually did do that. It's just he's so good. It could be that.
Yeah, I was really confused by that exchange.
They're just gushing. They're just bull washing Russell. Okay, I don't think we should take that comment seriously in the slightest. Because come on.
Okay, good. There's another clip relating to Series 4. This mini-series occupies a slightly weird place. In the UK, or anywhere via VPN, on iPlayer, this all makes sense. You have this ident at the start with terrible music, which is all classes here and Sarah Jane and Torchwood and all Classic Who and everything's here. Go watch all this other stuff, which I don't like the ident per se, but I love the idea of, hey, let's keep all the past Who churning around. I think that's great. I like that. So there's a real sense of the show is in conversation with itself insofar as I think people are meant to watch in either direction now almost. Like when Shooty starts and it's called Season 1, obviously that's like a fresh start, and because on Disney Plus they don't have Classic Who or New Who yet, at least, maybe one year they will. It's like you start from there. It's part of the reason I'm sure why it's called Season 1 now. But these 60th specials, before Disney, are this kind of weird thing where obviously this is like a Series 4 sequel, but obviously it's also kind of a Shooty prequel. And so there's kind of a weird, are people meant to start here, or is this only for people who started with Series 4, or what is kind of the function of these episodes? There's a really interesting little thing in the InVision commentary related to that.
Binary. He's got a spell back.
Binary.
And we're absolutely back in 2009.
Yeah, which was very much, you must go back, faithful viewer, and have a look at those episodes. The last 2 episodes of Season 4.
Yeah.
And then maybe watch this one again. I mean, all that's great epic stuff. Look at that.
So are these episodes, is it to make you go back on iPlayer and rewatch the ending of Series 4 and then you rewatch this episode like Phil is saying? Or do you think these episodes, are they, because Disney Plus is starting with these. I mean, it's going to do its huge marketing push with, how Shooty starts, but it has these on Disney Plus. This is the first Doctor Who things on Disney Plus. What's kind of the idea here? Is starting here okay? Or is this just for you go back to Series 4? Are you meant to rewatch Series 4 first? What is the kind of the function here?
To be honest, I don't think for this bridge series of mini-series, I don't think they really care that much about people starting new, because I think when the actual new Doctor comes in, that's when they're going to really start caring about jumping on points and stuff. So I don't think it really... I don't think they're really that worried about the whole new viewers jumping in here on Disney Plus. When they say stuff like this, I think they are just talking about to people who have watched it before, fans and stuff, people who care about Donna and stuff already, people who know... Or at least people who have access to iPlayer and can go watch it. So people in the UK, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they're really too bothered here. But what I think it does do is very nice. Is I like that very uniquely Doctor Who. We timey-wimeys the show where it's just jump in wherever. Okay, this is a sequel to Series 4 15 years later, and it's also the big new thing before Shooty, so you have to watch this too. But I like that. Clearly it's coming from, this is just a story Russell wanted to tell, from the tweet-alongs, he and Catherine Tate and David Tennant, they got together, and then this is what came out of it. It's not some sneaky plan to get everyone on board and watching the old series. But I just do like that as a side effect, it's kind of made things a bit messy in where you should watch and what order you should watch, because that's, as much as the fan base would like to believe, it's not the most important thing in the world.
It's the fan thing, isn't it? You can't start with this. It references the Series 4 finale. There's no possible way you can enjoy this episode or start with this.
My prerequisites!
I mean, it's the first episode on Disney Plus. So many people are going to start with this and going to have a great time because it's a good episode of TV. And it's people start with... Why do fans say you can't start with these sorts of episodes, but you can start with Blink? It's just complete insanity. You can start with anything. Obviously, you can start with Turn Left. You can start people would know this because I'm sure we've all done it for other shows where we've started in ridiculous positions and it's fine because it's only a fan brain thing to be you can't possibly, you can't start with the Age of Steel. You'll never understand. Don't skip 9, so on. something I really like with Doctor Who, especially, is I think the way I think episodes can send you backward as much as they can send you forward. I think there's a lot of episodes, like actually, yeah, The Age of Steel, Rise of Cybermen, The Age of Steel. You watch that, and obviously, whether you're watching in 2006 and you're going to watch, what was it next, The Idiot's Lantern, or you're watching on DVD in the New Who era or whatever, and obviously you're just going to keep watching with Series 2. It has a classic villain in there, and if you went into an ABC shop or BBC shop or whatever, then there would be Earthshock or whatever DVD there, and you're going to go, oh well, I just saw the Cybermen in this new, the current show. I'll be interested to see what were the Cybermen like back then, and you go back. I think Doctor Who is really good at having this thing where an episode can send you forward as much as it can send you backward, and I think that's a cool thing with the 60th. In that, actually, how can I put this? I guess one way or another, the 60th is going to lead into Shooty, right? It's going to. I mean, presumably Shooty will be in the giggle because, presumably 14 is going to regenerate one way or another. And so if you start with the big Disney push into Shooty's era, people might be interested, even if they just start with that. Oh, yeah, I see that Shooty was in an episode beforehand with David Tennant. I know him. That would be interesting to watch. Can I watch these? And then, you watch the giggle, you might want to watch these other two. And then if you watch that, you might want to watch the whole David Tennant era. And then you might want to not skip 9. You can get sent backward, even starting from a very logical point. You start with Rose, you might see a DVD for Spearhead or whatever, and you're like, oh, well, I just saw those bad guys. I just think it's really cool with Doctor Who, and it's kind of an anti-fan brain thing in that episodes send you forward and episodes can send you backward, and I think that's really cool.
That is really cool.
I mean, even this, it sends you backward into the comics, right? If you really like Meep, if you think Meep was really funny, go read the comic, which does the Meep story even better.
Which I think serves as a good celebration of the 60th. Let's just go back and check out more Doctor Who.
Should we explain to Missy our disappointment with some of the Meep stuff?
Yeah, in broad terms. I guess what I was about to say without spoiling the comic too much, but the comic isn't really necessarily the kind of thing you can spoil necessarily, because I think the way it works is, it's so, the enjoyment of it is not necessarily the twist, but the fact it's so in your face. In fact, funnily enough on that point, the comic does the reveal of the Meep being evil way, way earlier, in a way that RTD actually wanted to imitate, but got notes saying, no, this is too early.
Hello, faithful podcasters. It is me, it's Russell T Davies here, and this show is now probably covered by more behind-the-scenes material than any other show on planet Earth. So how can I think of things that I haven't said anywhere else? I'm trying for you, dear podcasters, because I love you. It's as simple as that. So first thing you can talk about, or you can ignore, whatever you want, is the Meep. In the very first draft of this script, the Meep revealed himself much earlier. In draft 1, it was practically straight away, or in Rose's shed. As in the comic strip, he reveals himself in the comic strip a significant chunk earlier, before the chase, not after the chase. So in the very first script, it's like he'd be in Rose's shed and she'd said, oh, I was making toys and things like that. And then every time she turned her head, she'd turn away to pick up a toy. He'd kind of look at the camera and go, soon I will feast on her blood. Like that, which I thought was really funny. I was told by my bosses, give me notes, they said he revealed him as a villain too soon. I don't know. To this day, I still watch it thinking, I think that was really funny. Because then Rose would turn back to him, did she say something? And he'd go, meep, meep. Like that. So would it have been better to reveal the Meep as a villain earlier?
One thing the comic does is it has the Meep's internal monologue. And that is so funny because you get this contrast of the Meep being really cute and cuddly and meep, meep and getting petted like a gerbil, while in its head it's nursing these absolute fantasies of death and suffering, you will all burn. Universes have been destroyed for less. You will not pet me. There's something absolutely hysterical about that. And it's a real shame. Because meanwhile, in the actual episode that RTD wrote, once the Meep's evil turn happens, it just gets dialogue oh, activate the whatever matrix. Fucking turn on the something fold, the blimmin' whatever loop. We just get so much that crap jargon. There's a real loss of humour with the Meep in the episode, which is a real shame. And I think it must just be a consequence of the Meep storyline being, I guess, jostling alongside the things that Artie really wants to do, which is the Rose and the Donna stuff mainly. So the Meep stuff is there as the device to get things moving. But I think once the actual main story with 14 and Donna really kicks into gear, I think the Meep kind of gets lost a little bit. And it's a shame because it's a really funny comic.
Earlier when I was saying RTD kind of rinses his his moves through the official podcast to validate what he's doing. It's interesting that the one time he kind of doesn't do that. Well, he does do exactly that, but not in a way that's kind of aligning with the show itself, is when he talks about those notes that he got that, no, don't do the Meep reveal the way the comic did. It's revealing the Meep's evil too early. And then he kind of disagrees a bit. He kind of goes, well, what do you think? Because I think that might have actually worked. It's kind of interesting. It's the one time he kind of says maybe the episode didn't fully do it right, and maybe my early idea was better.
That does sound really interesting, and it makes me want to read the comic. It's tough to know like which of those would have worked better on screen, because it is nice to just have lovely Meep and then get the reveal along with everyone else. But the way it's described in the comic sounds lovely. And what I agree so much is that we didn't get enough Meep, especially evil Meep, because as you say, when evil Meep is revealed, it's kind of shunted off into the top of its spaceship for the rest of the runtime while we focus on the Dr. Donna, and it is just a shame to adapt such a great story and just shove it up alongside other plot stuff. It's been like adapting Human Nature for the series 2 finale and having to deal with Ten and Rose separating at the same time.
God.
My favorite bit of the comic is this page of we kind of get an insanely abbreviated version when the Wrarth warriors are explaining to 14 in his Stones of Blood routine that the Meeps were good, but then the sun went weird and it turned them bad and, maniacally evil. In the comic, this is revealed in like a really cool visual flashback where you get to see the Meeps all dancing and singing and being like insanely cute with like funny little nursery rhymes, and they're hopping and they're skipping around on their little meat planet. And then this black sun, emerges and it completely poisons, and it's this cool like psychedelic imagery, and it completely poisons the Meeps and they all turn insanely brutal and evil. And you see the Meeps beheading, like you see them actually being torturous and evil and, just so malevolent. And just the contrast of that is like very, very funny in the comic. And they're still doing nursery rhymes as they like do the beheading. They've just turned them into like really violent nursery rhymes. And it feels like the whole comic, like comedic centerpiece of the comic to me. And I was so frustrated we lost that. Too many VFX shots maybe, but like, people would have went nuts for seeing the Meeps like behead someone or eat someone or something. And I think the Meep feels a little toothless in the episode because like it gets paraded around on a little throne and it kills 2 Wrarth warriors, but doesn't really do much else. Like I know it activates the dagger drive, but there's no like tangible, it doesn't eat anyone, it doesn't behead anyone. Like we're mostly laughing at, look at its angry little face more than, oh, this is actually bizarrely evil and violent.
Yeah, that's the full evil turn, just the cute face, like, scowls and has sharp teeth now, and that's all we get.
And even like a small thing like this, like the moment in the comic where the Meep pulls out the gun and fries a Wrarth warrior, which we sort of get in the episode, in the comic, the Meep does it while going, meep, meep, and just like shoots while meeping. That is so fucking funny. We don't get that in the episode at all. Like, so it really, I think evil Meep is just done very boringly in the episode, I think is the main problem. Like fun vocal performance and everything, but just no good lines, no good humour. Like it's a real missed opportunity. Yeah, and it's a shame because like, I think the visual effects and stuff, the animatronic, like CGI, it all really looks fucking great. It looks alive in a way that is like kind of unsettling. And and I totally get why they kind of saved the reveal like from midway through, like you said, Missy. Like I totally get that. Like from an episode of a TV, that kind of perspective, it makes complete sense. But nonetheless, like we could have been so much funnier with evil Meep.
The comic, and I'm not the only one who says this. A lot of people say this, including the comics creators Dave Gibbons and Pat Mills, who had a lovely visit to set when they were doing the sequence at the Steelwork equivalent set. Well, Steelwork equivalent location, that power station. It was really cool to see that. Like the behind the scenes, it showed. Both of them kind of said they've gone out of the way not to just like flatter us or do like the requisite, hey, you wrote the story, we're adapting. The production was like very, very, very cool to them. Like it paid them where they didn't get. I think Pat Mills was complaining on Twitter recently they don't get the royalties from like Panini they should be getting or something, but like they got paid through this episode and they were very, very loved. Like Tennant came bounding up to them. Phil Collinson talks nicely about them on the commentary. RTD, talks very nicely about the comic. It's really nice to see, like everyone really loves this story. Like it's not it is a true, we really, really, really love this 1980 comic. That feels like the most anniversary-esque element of this episode to me, because obviously it's like a Series 4 sequel more than anything else. But the anniversary thing is like, hey, this is an old Doctor Who story and we really, really love it. And here's a bunch of celebration of it, which makes it all the weirder that there's an extremely RTD-ish thing in the comic. The comic in general gets called proto-RTD-ish because it does that real slice of life domesticity, jarring up against, crazy alien hijinks, but kind of melding them all together in a way that makes a lot of sense. One of the big expressions of that is when we learn the Wrarth warriors aren't that evil, they have tea at like the equivalent of the comics equivalent of Rose's house, basically. And there's just really cute panels of the Wrarth warriors doing their like weird tongue moves to like eat the cake that's been prepared for them. And they're all like chatting over, meep stuff and everything. And it's just this very cute domestic scene that's so bizarre because you've got these, big exoskeleton aliens sitting down at like a dinner table. Just a really, really sweet scene. And, I just 100% assumed it would be in this episode because, R2D loves food, like scenes. He loves, tuna madras. He loves scenes about characters eating and stuff. And we don't get the alien eating scene, which is like a big part of the comic. I just thought that was surprising.
That's instantly what I thought. It was like we could have just had the Wrarth warriors eating tuna madras.
See, I liked how the Wraths were cast. I like their voices, like the performances, and the way they were kind of characterized there. Like they start talking, they sound kind of maybe a little bit posh and like British or whatever. But I liked how they were kind of presented. Like their character seemed to be there, but again, like it was just there. But they seemed to be handled in a way that was quite mercenary. Ultimately, like they're just there to, a couple of them get shot and sad death scene. Oh, I'm dead. And it was like, okay, we're taking you off to prison now. So again, it's another missed opportunity to actually have fun with them, which is really odd. And I think I guess it just seems to be like a lack of interest overall, which is kind of annoying. Like great visual designs and executions and stuff. I liked how, when they start flying, I thought, whoa, that's actually cooler than anything they did in the comic. That's crazy.
Yeah. They also, it was just something weird in a very good way. So much of the episode was in camera. Like, Doctor Who, I don't know, this isn't like a Doctor Who thing to be doing this. This is like a showing up other prestige TV thing. So much was physical and real. The base of the Meep rocket was real. It was actually there at the real location. That wasn't like a set and it wasn't all CGI. The base of the rocket, actors were actually around. And that actual location was an actual place they were in. The Meep was mostly real. They layered on CGI for the face after the Miriam did the actual voice for it. And there's, bits where they're made for CGI. You can kind of tell in the latter half of the episode and when it's running around. But that's mostly physical. The Wrarth warriors are this crazily well done physical thing. I don't even know what's going on here, especially now the episode had the money to be like using CGI more. Phil Collinson says in the Envision commentary that what they're working with is like, I assume he means for the Disney series now, but he says,
when we first started this, we would spend on CGI and visual effects in a whole 13, 14-part series what we're spending on an episode now.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of money floating around, and obviously there's even more. Even before Disney, there was still a lot of money floating around in these specials. What's the in-camera commitment stuff? It's like, it's so cool, but this is like showing up other shows on Disney Plus with, how real and good it's looking in that sense. I mean, it's really cool, like for Doctor Who to be doing that. I'm just kind of surprised.
Maybe it's a point of pride, like as Doctor Who, I guess, because almost like it's that show that's so. I guess maybe part of its identity is having like effects that kind of can be seen as a bit like maybe sometimes wobbly, maybe sometimes a bit shit, but always visibly like practical effects, bubble wrap, and so on. So almost like the evolution of that is to do like proper like working animatronics and stuff, like someone like controlling the Meep's facial features with a little controller, like the guy had behind the scenes, rather than just doing it all CGI, because that's such a cop out. At the end of the day, like it's so you could just do everything in CGI, but doing stuff in camera almost kind of keeps it being a little bit more like Doctor Who, if that makes any sense.
The battle in the middle of the episode, I couldn't believe what I was watching. Like, this is Doctor Who, and we're clearly in a real physical space. Like, this is a real street, and we're getting like, I can see this is all actually happening. I can see the light is reflecting right. This is real. The sonic walls. That's real, like plexiglass they're holding. Obviously, they've added CGI, like effects and bluish stuff to it. But the basis of everything is real here, and it's just so weird to be like proud and happy of Doctor Who for like the visual effects. It's very, very, very surreal. Basically, I think that sequence, and what better director to be doing kind of big movie Doctor Who than Talalay. But like those crane shots that are just doing like a showing off move of check this out, check out the shit we can do. It's just bizarre for Doctor Who to be doing this, and this is before the Disney infusion, so
it is a fun contrast to fans who are like, oh, I can't wait for Doctor Who to use that volume fucking screen stage like Fleming Mandalorian uses, because it's like
and looks a squillion times better.
Yeah, exactly.
You look at the TARDIS at the end there, and I was like double taking when I first watched that, going, what's actually happening here? That's got to be CGI in the back, but why does it look so real? Why does it look so tactile? And then that's real. That is like a monstrously big set they've made. This is like, people are like, this is on Disney Plus and we want this to look like the other Disney Plus shows. This looks better than the other Disney Plus shows. This is real. Look where that TARDIS set looks, infinitely better than so many things I've seen on, other of the Marvel shows. Maybe not Loki, which actually does have some tangibility to it. But a lot of these other shows, there's no glossy weightlessness to so much of this episode. Even the bits that look cheaper, like in the car park, they're in a real car park. You know, the tangibility of these real locations and this in-camera stuff is really, really, really cool. So I'm loving that. I guess the other aesthetic thing is the music. What was the deal with the breathing at the end?
Yeah, Gold always makes odd choices with the main themes. I mean, I thought what he does throughout the bulk of this episode is actually brilliant. You know, I think I love how he brings back the old themes. I love how he's completely in tune. Just the music when the Doctor is running around the new TARDIS set. Oh, just, you know, it's pure heaven. You know, Gold is firing on all cylinders for for this episode. I think the duration of it. Don't get the breathing in the end credits. Strange thing thrown in there. It doesn't feel very cogent.
Yeah, I agree. The music in the episode is wonderful. Right when 14 opens the TARDIS doors and walks out onto the street, and that jaunty guitar starts, I was immediately like, this is nice. This is we're back, we're home. But yeah, I agree. The theme's very weird. My favorite bit of the theme, when we heard it in the 60th concert, was that sort of descending, falling piano-y bit.
Which wasn't even in the episode's actual intro. Yeah, I noticed that too.
Which was very sad to me, because that was my favorite bit, hearing it live. And the breathing is indeed very weird.
I was surprised he held himself back with the reprising of the themes. I thought we'd get a huge brash, all the strange creatures more than once. I thought we'd be getting the Doctor forever all over the place. But he's actually, we get Donna's theme. We get the Flavia, the 9th, 10th Doctor theme. But he doesn't overdo it at all.
We get I Am the Doctor.
That was weird.
At one point, don't we? Yeah.
That was weird.
Ignition in 40.
I still haven't settled how I feel. It was the more generic bit towards the end of I Am the Doctor, which is, brass and, big excitement. It wasn't the hugely iconic, this is 11 now string bit that it starts with dun 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 dun. It wasn't that bit, which would have just been insane, I think, to use. But still, I've seen even, more casual watchers are still going, hey, that sounds like, that's Matt Smith music, right? I know Murray's very much one to be like, we talked about this gig when we did our Murray Gold conversation when his rehiring was announced, that he's never one to let the reasoning behind the leitmotif stand in front of what music is going to work best. And his showrunners are even more that way. You look at the 50th soundtrack where he wrote a lot of new music and was kind of, I assume, overruled for some of it. Because sometimes, even if it doesn't really make sense thematically, sometimes a bit of music just seems to fit somewhere better. So I get that the thought from Murray and RTD might have been, obviously Donna and the 14th Doctor aren't the 11th Doctor, but that bit of music just sonically that would work perfectly here, wouldn't it? And it's not the bit where everyone is going to go, hey, that's Matt, but still, I mean, it's a really nice reprisal. Just musically, it's a really fun new version of that bit of music, but that's still very weird to me.
I think there's a little bit of intentionality to it, because that's the scene where Dr. Donna has come back. So we've got another Doctor almost intruding and being opposite, like the Doctor we've had for most of the episode. And obviously it is not 11.
Yeah.
But it's nonetheless a Doctor who is like kind of fun and joyful and joyous. So I think it's a bit of mischief. It's a bit of mischief sneaking in there, in the sense of like a little bit of a cheeky reference to a previous, I Am the Doctor theme. And almost like, maybe it's the fact that the title of that bit of music is I Am the Doctor. It's almost like an announcement, like a meta announcement. Donna being, I am also the Doctor, by the way, I am the Doctor.
I'll go 100% in if on the soundtrack it's called I Am the Dr. Donna. That'll make it work for me.
Oh, that'd be good. Oh, I'd love that.
That'd be great. And that did actually work for me, that. When it kicked in, I was like, yeah, this is obviously Matt's not in the camera, but the way, like what Gig said, where it's like, it is the Doctor, and it's kind of a cheeky thing, that it sold it for me. It was a really good scene.
Music also, the episode started in a very weird way, didn't it? The weather report, as some people are calling it, where the episode kind of starts and ends on these not great. We just talked up the visuals so much, but the episode wants to fight us there, doesn't it? It starts and ends on shots that aren't the best. It starts on like a video game character, it's like a Smash Brothers select your character screen. It starts on Tennant being superimposed over like vague space imagery. I think can work when it's just like his face, as it did in some of those shots. But when it's his whole body and you're like going, well, he's just standing on nothing. He's like standing on a Windows wallpaper. That was such a bizarre and not good shot to start the episode on. And then the dialogue is very... I think this is much cooler than doing straight up previously on. And breaking the fourth wall, I'm all for that. The lines I don't have that much trouble with. It's just a very weird situation to have him looking like a weatherman superimposed over green screen, vague imagery.
Yeah, it looks absolutely god-awful. And I think it's very important to note that it's insane to have such an amateurish looking, messy shot for like the first opening shot, because it really is like Tennant awkwardly standing in front of a green screen. And it's meant to be like, oh, I used to have this best friend and blah, 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 blah. But a lot of the gravity of this scene and like interest in the opening is taken, but like what is happening? What does this look like? It looks bad. The
cuts to the pure effects shots from series like the ITD one look so bad, upscaled to 4K. The shot of the Shadow Proclamation, oh my god, it looks so awful.
Pixelated, like PlayStation 1, just like...
Yeah.
I like that, but I didn't watch the 4K version. So I like that there was incongruity with how it looks now and how this before that looked. Like part of the charm to me, and part of the like we're looking back. Like if there had been a flashback to say like a Hartnell era story, I would have admired the messiness and like lower quality of that in the same way that I admired the messiness and lower quality of this. But I admit that I acknowledge that's probably just me.
I guess if we're talking the weather report, that loops into everyone has lots of opinions on this. Everyone has lots of thoughts on this, including the Doctor, the Tennant, and the Davies themselves, which is ends the most interesting dialogue of the episode in the TARDIS at the end, which is, who frowned me this face? Why do I have this face?
It's such a brilliantly drawn character that I don't think she ever really left me. I don't think I ever really let her go.
Yeah.
She was there.
Just sort of thought, yeah.
Yeah.
My wife actually said to me, she said, are you going to do any research? You're going to sort of dust it off?
Watch it.
Can you still do the voice? She said. And I didn't really think about it. It just sort of happened.
This is a sonic screwdriver. And if it's good at one thing, it's resonating concrete.
Maybe it's not. Maybe if you compare and contrast, we're wildly different.
Not that.
Way off the mark.
Can you imagine?
But luckily, it's not necessarily the same Doctor and Donna anyway,
no.
so that covers a multitude of things. I'm not even the same version that I used to be.
Yeah, so why are you doing it the same way? Absolutely no imagination on your part.
I know, I should have really thought about that.
Could have changed accent.
It would have been funny if you'd have just come on being completely...
Hello!
That was more of an acting workman-like thing, I guess, rather than a philosophical, why am I like this? But what do you think of what they were saying there?
I maintain I would have loved him to do a Scottish accent, but I think I already like 14 more than 10.
Yeah, me too.
Agreed.
It's like they took all the good bits. It's like they took all the good bits of 10 and dropped all the cringe bits. It's actually amazing. You feel like he has grown the fuck up, and rightly so, given everything he's been through since he was 10, and obviously the fact that actor's older. Like it's just so lovely. It's like all the lovable bits of 10. And I just feel instantly at home with this Doctor. Like, yes, please, more.
And Catherine says in the thing, oh, so if you're not the same, why are you're not the same incarnation, why are you still doing it the same? And I think from an acting perspective and also from a narrative perspective, it's just absolutely beyond the right call, because we do get this like grown up 10 and it's such a vast improvement. It's so very nice to see him again, and it's warm and nostalgic and lovely, and it's improved, and obviously we wouldn't have gotten that if Tennant or RTV and the decision makers had decided, let's do 14 completely different from 10. So, which obviously you shouldn't have done if you're getting David Tennant back. So it's just, it's lovely to have Tennant back.
So that clip was like him saying, I didn't really do it that differently, and Catherine kind of saying, well, that was lazy, and him saying, well, I guess I could have done a funny voice. In another clip from the commentary, he does kind of more go into why he played it so similarly.
But what are you doing that's different? Did it feel different? Are you instilling him with more wisdom and magic?
Not very consciously. I just sort of figured, well, I'm older.
Yeah.
So that it'll come through a slightly different filter.
Yeah.
But Russell writes it with the same kind of brio, I think.
Yeah.
But then Russell's older, so he will be writing a slightly different version of the character as well.
Yes.
I think that was the thinking, that we'll come at it as the different humans that we are.
Yes.
As writer and as actor and as everyone else, and that will make it as different or as similar as it. Because I suppose you could argue I could be dressed completely differently. I could have a new hat and a funny voice. He could have been completely different version, but that seemed to defeat the purpose of coming back, really.
Yes, I agree. Completely agree. Yes.
I think that's what you were hitting on, Gig, I think that's what you were connecting with, Gig, that you liked better about this Tennant is he's just older and wiser and more mature. It's not that he has to play it so, like he keeps coming back to the voice thing. It's not that he has to change a big superficial thing. It's that he's just calmed down and he feels more emotionally mature. Like I swooned when he was telling Shirley that, I say things like that now. I can just openly say I love people now. Or that he's just openly being more warm, and he's not caught up in his own vanity so much, and he's not caught up in his own ego, and he's not gurning so much. And he's just not so energetic. He's like a puppy that's grown into an older dog. He's just easier to be around now. And so like Gig said, it's just all the things I liked about the 10th Doctor performance are dialed up, and all the things I didn't like are dialed down. And so I just love this. And his costume is so good. I love it. I know they've talked about the costume as like the explication of, it's obviously we're very similar to before, but it's kind of, they don't really say classier, but I would say classier. It's a little less self-consciously preppy, and I love the texture of what he's wearing. It just looks gorgeous. And I'm not a costume guy at all with Doctor Who, but this one really stands out to me. I'm almost regretful we're only getting 3 episodes, because I just love the kind of status quo they've started here. I love how he looks. I love this characterization. I know it's great to leave you wanting more, but I just love everything they've done with Tennant and this Doctor here. It's working for me so much.
I think the key is they have not imposed any obligation that he needs to go back to like 10. So like if this had been, say, not a new Doctor, but here's just a throwback flashback set during 10's era, it would be completely different and so much worse. It's because he has the freedom of saying, okay, well, you don't have to do it differently, but you don't have to do it the same either. You don't have to be constrained by what you did before. That it can just feel completely at ease and organic and just have its own life, right? And that's why it just works very well. It's just a completely natural, slightly older version of the performance, version of the character. Yeah, it just works easily.
I also think, just to make it clear, we're not, like, Tennant's a great actor, obviously, but I don't know about you, Missy, but Gig and I aren't, like, 10th Doctor fanboys. Like, I know I've said this elsewhere on the channel. I stopped watching the show when I was a kid in the 10th Doctor era, partly because he was annoying me so much. He wasn't working for me. So for both of us to be saying, like gawking and swooning and, squeeing over how much we like this Doctor, That's not a coded, yes, 10's back finally. That's actually, we really like what Tennant's doing here, and we think it is meaningfully different in a few ways. The 10th Doctor was very, very irritating in lots of ways. So Missy, what was did you have a big difference between your 10th and 14th Doctor thoughts, like Gig and I, or?
I did, because I have to say that I entirely agree with the both of you. I was not a huge fan of the 10th Doctor. I found him annoying and just sort of a lot of the time. When this was announced that he was coming back, even though it was like, oh, it's not the 10th Doctor, it's a new incarnation, I was still a bit apprehensive because I was like rolling my eyes like, oh, I'm not really too keen on another set of this. But I agree, I was so blown away. So I adore this incarnation of David Tennant as the Doctor. He's I'm trying to think of a word that isn't the way that you've said it, both of you, where it's just like it's all the good parts of 10 and none of the bad parts. He's just more mellow. He's
refined. Yeah?
Calmer. It's refined, and it's just a joy to watch him. He's so good.
What do you think of the new intro? Not musically, visually.
Shit.
Oh, I hated it.
Really bad. It's just full of disjointed jump cuts. It's just trying to look. It just feels remote and distanced and not very. It's just really lost the hypnotic vibe that the good title sequences have. And also, it's just ridiculously short. Like, it's so short, it's like a TikTok. It just does not actually get to the end of the main theme. It's just really like what you're doing. The logo comes in like a, JPEG, like just kind of rotating a little bit. It just looks so shit, man. And there's no, it doesn't come in time to the music or anything. It's just so incoherent. Like, what the hell? It feels like they must have a longer edit of it tucked away somewhere that we aren't seeing.
This is how it's in conversation with the 12th Doctor era, the out of sync titles.
Yeah, I did not like it at all. I don't like how the TARDIS flings around across the screen, and we don't, in a way that doesn't make sense. Like, it goes off the left-hand side and it comes back on the right-hand side, and it cuts weirdly. And
then again, the same direction.
I don't like, in addition to the logo coming on at the end, I don't like how the names are there. I don't like David Tennant and Catherine Tate just awkwardly floating, off-center, and then it's, in a weird direction. They kind of sort of just move to the side. It feels messy and not in a good way. It feels really slapdash. It feels like sort of like someone their first go, if they first got a sort of 3D editing program that could do that, and this is their first attempt at it. It feels quite slapdash and fuzzy and just not refined. The opposite of 14's performance.
It's like they threw a whole dartboard of ideas of what would be really epic, and just threw them all in a blender and just kind of shat out the result without any kind of real consistent through line. Here's a clear concept.
It feels like that weird prestige idea of what a Doctor Who title should be like, and just sort of missing the mark of what makes a good Doctor Who title sequence.
The worry for me is I thought the 60th would have a big nostalgia thing of let's do the RTD1 titles but glossier or something. That just seemed like if we're doing the nostalgia show, let's do that. The fact they didn't do that makes me think, are these Shooty's titles as well?
I think they probably are.
They better not be. But yeah, I assumed they were, but I hope they're not.
Yeah, I'm fine with the imagery. I just, out of syncness I can kind of deal with, but the breathlessness is annoying. This is one of the best theme tunes in the world. Let's not rush it. Musically, what's the show doing? The weird ident with the generic Marvel fare, rushing the theme tune, playing I'm the Doctor. What is going on?
Yeah, important to note, by the way, that the Whoniverse ident of that theme isn't on Disney Plus. So that is obviously because it wouldn't really make sense on Disney Plus. So it's only being it's only being inflicted on viewers in the UK trying to watch this on BBC. Hey, Whoniverse fanfare, wee, it's Marvel. Yeah, so it feels like Doctor Who's become a subsidiary of Whoniverse, which is not a pleasant feeling. I get the fun of advertising the iPlayer collection and stuff, but still, it's just a weird thing to shove at the start, especially when the music itself is not the Doctor Who theme. It's just the most generic bit of pap that I think Gold has ever composed.
It plays before the Audible Chewing podcast as well. The official podcast has the ident at the start. On a completely different note, maybe the most interesting character note for Donna anyway is the charity thing. What do you guys think of that?
I love the fact that the RTD took this thing that felt kind of almost flippant when he did it in the End of Time. I would just casually give Donna a fucking lottery win. Yeah, just a sop to Donna. She'll be great now. She's sorted. I love that RTD took that and just completely not only gets rid of it, and he doesn't just throw it away. He makes a real point of that and what he does with that. He makes it an avenue to actually explore Donna and what her life has been. And I love that it builds after that wonderful explosion that the doctor she has after her memory comes back. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, I gave away all that money. Like, even though it's made a heroic thing, but she's still pissed off about it. Because like, oh my God, why do I have to be such a hero? You know, I love that. Oh, it's terribly funny and terribly sweet.
It's actually quite similar to the Metacrisis itself, where like that's like a bow tied on the end of Donna's story, the Metacrisis, and then so is the lottery win in the end of time. And so since we're bringing back Donna, we have to undo those bows and like insert it, like continue the story that had been just wrapped up.
It's so characterful. It's like how on earth can they nullify the lottery in a way that doesn't feel cheap? And I was blown away. It's such it builds story the way they did it. It says so much. I was really happily surprised by what RTD pulled off there. So Donna, do you think she's just like venting when she's like, I did this because, you know, Technobabble made me soft like you? Or do you think that's an actual, I hate that I did that, I hate that I was like you? Like, what emotionally is the beat there exactly? Is it just resentment at the mind wipe and the whole situation? How would you characterize that?
I think for me, it's just like, it's sort of a cheeky reversion to like early Series 4 sort of shouty cross Donna. It's not like a big serious deal. Like, she's not like genuinely furious, but it is as part of this whole nostalgia to her returning to Series 4. We get a lovely moment of Donna going off on some like very like petty little thing. It's not petty. It's just like, it's 166 million pounds, but still, I didn't read it as any more than that. Like, she's not genuinely like, oh, I can't believe I was made nice by the lingering memory of you.
Yeah, I think what it is, I think what pisses her off is the fact that she didn't quite have, she went that long period without really knowing what it was making her do that. Like, she didn't quite have the autonomy there. It was this thing, that, you know, the doctor was swanning off, having, you know, well, grieving, and having his own life. While Donna was just there, like, having this little bit of doctorness that she didn't even realise was there, almost like steering her from behind the scene. So I think it's like that built up kind of just, oh my God, that's so annoying. Oh. So I think it makes sense that she's kind of pissed off by that. But it's not in the sense of genuinely like, oh, I hate being like the doctor, I hate you, I hate this, blah, 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 blah. I think it's just like an understandable, just kind of like, it's that mix of like, sometimes when you do something good and it's kind of at your own expense, it's kind of like, well, you know, I'm glad I did that, but man, it would have been really nice if I hadn't. That kind of slight, sort of like self-interest kind of like panging in you sometimes. I think it makes sense.
And it's kind of a weird thing because I've seen people argue both ways, that it's nice that Donna giving away the lottery and having that bit in her, it's kind of like that we retained, because what was so tragic about her losing everything in Journey's End was her losing all that character growth and development that she went through. And so I've seen people argue that it's nice that she kept that sort of things she'd learned from traveling with the doctor and then was kind and gave away the lottery money. But in the same thing, I've also seen people argue that it's Donna's just more lack of agency from Donna, is that she didn't get to keep the money because there was a tiny little bit of the doctor still inside her that made her want to give it all to charity. So it's a weird thing. I fall on the former side.
It's kind of fascinating how it's all spooled out. Like, the lottery win was the doctor, like, making an overt effort to basically, like, steer Donna's life from the sidelines. You know, even, obviously it was, like, intended to, like, benefit her in a positive way, but it was just kind of more manipulations almost. Like, Donna was, like, being puppeteered around by these forces, with people who knew stuff that she had forgotten. So the fact that failed, and it went completely the other way, is an interesting kind of quirk in that, isn't it?
Little quibble. Shirley is Unit Scientific Advisor number 56.
56, yeah.
And the doctor says he's Unit Scientific Advisor number 1. It's been a while since I watched Spearhead. Wasn't Liz Shaw the first scientific advisor?
As a diehard, forever Liz Shaw stan, I don't know, and I don't give a shit.
I think if the line had been, I was number 2, that would kind of, it wouldn't read the same way, wouldn't have the same impact, wouldn't scan quite the same way. I think the point of that exchange is to like locate the doctor, like at the origin of this organisation that Shirley is part of. So I think number 1 just says more than number 2 does. It just does.
It would, though, make people go back in an anniversary way to see who was number 1.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
RTD is a big Joe fan, so erasing Liz, you know.
True, that's in character.
The Sonic, its new abilities. I thought everyone would be all over this. I love the walls. I'm seeing some people don't like the walls. What's the other new thing it does? Oh, the Dracula have iPad now thing. The projector. Yeah, what do we think of the new Sonic stuff? Missy, you always come to blows with me over the walls, didn't we?
Yeah, but I think we were talking at cross purposes. I'm not against the walls as they exist. I don't think it's like a bad idea or it's ruining the show or we need to retire the Sonic. But I do think it just like slowed that action scene down to like a grinding halt as we like for like a whole minute watch David Tennant slowly push a light box. So I just think it just slowed down that scene, and it wasn't like it was the kind of thing where it was like, whoa, what's going on? He's doing this cool thing for about 5 seconds. And then the other 55 seconds was, yes, he's pushing it, it's there.
I rewound that because I enjoyed that whole sequence so much of him doing the pushing and everything. I love he's like a magician drawing something in the air. I think that's so cool. Then he enlivens it with a burst, and then he has to, my favorite bit is that he has to physically move it around. That's the really cool thing to me, is that it's not a Matt Smithy zip zap, with swish swash, just magically fixes the day. I love that it just produces something he has to then maneuver. You were so bored by that, and I was so energized by it. It's interesting.
I did like each individual bit of it. I loved the drawing in the air. I think that's so like creative and fun. And the bit where I think you just said that, the bit where he locks it in and like solidifies it with the Sonic.
Yeah.
I also did like this one scene where there's one shot of him in the hallway, like really like actually just like pushing it forward, not like sliding it out the door. I did like all of that. It was still a minute long, and it was way too long. Okay, I like it. I just didn't like how long that scene was.
For my part, with the new Sonic powers, I like that they are both linked by drawing things in the air, because that is a very intuitive use for a pointing device that weirdly we just haven't really had before, even though it's been a pointing device for so long. We haven't really had this attempt to okay, let's just draw shapes in midair, let's just create things, let's be an artist. So I love that they are linked through that immediately understandable visual grammar of let's draw rectangles and have them become things. That's really cool. I'd like to see more uses for that. I don't care how convenient they are for the narrative, go ahead, fine, sure, no problem.
I've seen people say that they like the big the new screen feature, but because they didn't like how in previous eras the Doctor would scan something and then stare at the Sonic, but I like the staring at the Sonic, so I'm not the screen is something I can take or leave. But it did remind me of the certain scene in Sherlock. It reminded me of, which
Neo hasn't watched. We must remind ourselves always.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be a bit vague. It's a scene in the second series, the second episode, where Sherlock says to John and the scientist, "Both of you get out. Both of you leave the room. I need to do something." And then he sort of mimes for about a few minutes, and Tennant sitting in front of this screen that isn't there, miming with the Sonic, made me feel a similar way. Which I understand doesn't work because I can't explain it properly because Neo hasn't seen Sherlock.
The screen kind of is there though, isn't it? For 14 though, it's not imaginary. I think he draws it, and I think other people can see it. I think.
Oh no, yeah, no, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the new Sonic overall. It's good. It's fine. I like that there's no explanation. We just have it. Same with the TARDIS. There's a very certain noticeable absence of explaining where things went.
The TARDIS. What do we think of the new TARDIS set?
I'm sad it's 3 walls. I would have really loved a full 360-degree set again, but I get probably why either they couldn't build that huge and have it also be 4 walls. And also, it's probably convenient in some ways for the directors and the crew to be able to just hover outside of it and have a big crane and just sort of lean in, rather than having to worry about all being inside this room physically. Nonetheless, it feels sort of like a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing, because it's a reversion to the kind of set it was in RTD1, but also it's huger and prettier and crazier and has a magic light grid in the ceiling. So it's I can't really complain that much.
To be clear what we mean there, when a set is 3 walls, obviously with the 3 walls you can see the camera films, but there's one wall you never see because there's nothing there. That's the behind the scenes wall. It's where they can put the cameras and, the steps and everything, which, most of the TARDIS sets have been. But in the Capaldi era and the end of Matt's era, that TARDIS was you can point the camera in any direction because the entire set is there. That's what we mean by 360. There's no missing bit of it. The whole, as if you were actually in the Doctor Who world, the whole set is the whole complete thing there. So you can put the camera absolutely anywhere. But in this, like in the old Coral TARDIS and Matt's first TARDIS, there's a wall missing. But that's not we couldn't afford it. It's a thing to do with you deciding how you're going to do your angles and how you're going to make your set work and everything. And this is a monstrously huge set. Missy, what do you think of the wall and the set in general?
Well, as for the wall, I'm really sad that it's more than 3 walls. I mean, it's more than 3, but it's not 4 walls. There's it's the tiniest sliver, and it makes me sad because I see it and I think, oh, could have just filled that in. And I did rewatch after learning that, I did rewatch the final scene, and it's now immediately noticeable that 14 and Donna are always on the same side of the console.
Yeah.
It made me miss the Capaldi era where we have Clara and the Doctor or Clara and Bill just walking around, and you lose a lot with that. As for the rest of the TARDIS, I do, unlike the Sonic, I have very strong thoughts on this in that I don't like it. I don't like how non-livable it feels. It's absolutely enormous, but there's the thing about the TARDIS, the thing I like about the TARDIS, and I think the thing that the Capaldi era TARDIS got really right is that it's not just the cockpit. This is the Doctor's front room. This is his lounge. It's that he lives in the TARDIS. And so when they first stepped inside, the first thing I thought of was this is not a room to be in. This is not a room to exist in and sit in and live in. This is a room solely for the purpose of running in, smashing on the controls, and running out. And that's obviously it's not the most important thing to me. It's not the most important thing to the show, but it is important to me because I like the idea that the TARDIS is the Doctor's home. Like in Series 10 where the Doctor says this is a safe space to Bill. It's it doesn't feel very human friendly. It's just made of just walkways that aren't very long. Aren't very wide, and weird, what's the word? Handrails that aren't very comfy cozy. It feels like the hallway of a hospital run through a MC Escher painting. So I don't like it because it does. Yeah.
Well, he is the Doctor, so hospital. Probably not intentional.
Oh, actually, that's a very valid point. I've seen lots of people say that it'll be nice, it'll be better, because like Capaldi did with the 7B TARDIS, he'll move in, he'll put up bookshelves and seats and everything, but looking at the narrowness of those walkways, there isn't much space except immediately around the console. So I can't work out how comfy and homey and how much stuff is going to be put in to clutter it up and make it nice. So that makes me sad. But I do think it's, again, coming back to how similar it is to RTD's first TARDIS, is that this is a difference in the way that RTD looks at the show. Because for him, it's all about what's out the doors. That's where the interesting stuff is. The TARDIS is just transport. It's just...
He lacks the warmth of Chibnall, who did actually have proper, long conversations in there sometimes, like Fugitive. And of course, Moffat did that even more so.
It's weird that Chibnall did that, but they didn't have a TARDIS suited for it.
But they still tried. Can you hear me? I can think of a good handful of real conversations, Spyfall, that we had in the TARDIS with the characters, and it felt a little more homey, I guess, even though it didn't look like a home I'd like to live in.
And they had that awkward conversation staircase put in for people to sit on, and that's what I feel. That's what I feel with the new RTD TARDIS. It's where are we going to have scenes in the TARDIS? It's just going to be around the console. That's all we've got. Or both people standing on one of the walkways.
I think if there's room for it to evolve in any way, like the Capaldi one did, I would say rather than it becoming more of a front room, I could see it maybe becoming more of the equivalent of a penthouse suite, an elevated platform, raised up. This is this is a cool scenic location, rather than a comfy living room. I think that's the vibe I get from it, having such a high ceiling and having the walkways that go up and down and loop around, and big space below the console, big space above it, and big space around the sides, big gaps, and the sense of it being elevated over an abyss, almost. I think I actually find the alienating quality of it to be kind of interesting and appealing. I think there's something about the TARDIS when it's kind of feeling like it's concealing things in its almost its excessive sterility or cleanliness that you kind of get a little bit, I think, in the Classic Who, a lot of the Classic Who versions of it. I think there is something fun there. I'm not massively in love with the Classic Who TARDISes, but I think I can see how they've influenced this new one. I can see how it's a very different take from the previous New Who ones, but I think there is potential to get it to work. I think you could make TARDIS scenes very creepy and scary if you really wanted to in a set like this that's so sterile, and especially with what you can do with lights and stuff. I think if you want to do something like that, something like Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, which is not a very good episode, but nonetheless plays a lot on the idea that the TARDIS is this alien entity that can be quite unpredictable and quite hostile at times, like you are in the belly of the beast almost. And I think there are different takes on the TARDIS you can get. I think there's no right answer in my opinion, so I think there's lots of potential in this one, even if we're not seeing it yet.
ITD said it was partially inspired by New Who doing these white TARDISes, like he calls out Clara's and the Fugitive Doctors, and showing that the kind of clean white TARDIS isn't just a classic nostalgia thing, it's actually a really good design that works, and that's part of what inspired him to do his own take on it, which is pretty cool.
The TARDIS. Hello, faithful podcasters. How much do we love that TARDIS? Well, I don't care what you think. I love it. I love it so much. And I think it's interesting that I based that over the past few years on very much loving the white TARDISes that were beginning to crop up in the programme. Clara and me flew off into the vortex in a white TARDIS. Then Jodie's era saw the Fugitive Doctor with that white TARDIS, and they stole that TARDIS from Gallifrey and flew back to Earth and stuff like that. And I loved it, and I had a long conversation with myself sitting there going, do I love that because I'm a fan of the 60s, 70s and 80s when the TARDIS was white, or do I love that because it's genuinely good? And I think now we built one, I think the answer is because it's genuinely good, but feel free to argue.
The individually controlled roundel lights, I think, is awesome, and I hope that's going to be used in creative ways. There's been reference, one of the producers said they can be used to spell out words.
I mean, it's just the greatest set. Look at the scale of it.
Yeah, isn't it brilliant? Yeah.
And you'd run around it. It's brilliant.
It was Rachel.
I thought you just did this.
Rachel sort of proposed it, and then I thought I've had to find a route.
Yeah, because there's so many.
This is...
I love it.
This is just such joyous
And I don't
fun.
really think you're acting there.
No, I'm not acting at all. I'm having the time of my life. I mean, it's a long way, though.
It is.
I had a bit of a recovery between takes.
I was going to say, yeah.
It's massive.
And the lights, that all happens.
That all really happens. None of that CGI.
Yeah.
The bottom's not CGI. The dome at the top's not. It really is a set, and it really is as big as it looks.
All the lights work independently. They can spell out words.
So every single one of the roundel lights is an individually controlled LED light. So it's just viewers, you are going to see this set do amazing things through the series. It really is.
It's just so cinematic.
Ooh, I like that. Imagine the TARDIS just like screaming words at you, like, get out now. That'd be amazing.
And, will we ever get a rave in there between young Shooty and Ruby?
This is my dream. This better absolutely happen. They have like the perfect like disco ballroom. It's like the inside of a disco ball, and just it would work so well with the youthful energy of Shooty and Millie. So please, a rave.
Yeah, I love the lights.
One more thing about the walkways while we're at it. The fact that, as we see, the Doctor can just run around for a really long time in there, that feels important to me, because I think, obviously, I mean, you could do this, it would be the same if it was just a giant open floor, like a dance floor or whatever, but the fact that it kind of loops around, I think there's a bit of a bouncy energy to that. Like, I think enabling the characters in the TARDIS just go on a whole journey without even leaving the set. I think that does create possibilities for how you can express yourself in that room, in that set.
You could have like the in Rose the Turn of the Earth one shot just as they walk up and down all around the walkway.
Oh yeah, yeah. Tennant running around, which was a Rachel Talalay idea. That it was just beautiful. One of the best moments of the episode. Just his utter joy. And his physicality in general was so cool this episode. I love when he mimed running to the Meep to try and encourage it. When he was on his knees scurrying around when he was trying to defend Donna when the Meep turned evil. It's just so many little physical choices he made which were just so good. And you know what was so beautiful this episode? Characters touched each other. They were touching each other, and it just felt like everyone inhibited the same physical reality, which the last era had this weird contrast, and everyone was saying really like lovey-dovey things, and we're all connected and love and hope, and you guys are the best ever, and no one was touching each other. It was this really cold artifice, even like pre-COVID, series 11, series 12, which I didn't like. I felt very disconnected from that, and so here everyone's touching each other heaps, and I love that.
And if we're talking about that ease that the characters have with each other, I think we should talk about Sylvia, because we haven't mentioned her like at all, but Sylvia is practically the MVP of this episode almost. So maybe second behind Catherine Tate and Donna. But like Sylvia, like the fact that, and this character who is often written off as like an annoying RTD mum, like in her original appearance, because of how like kind of mean she was to Donna a lot in her original run. The fact that she has evolved so much, the fact that she is so doing her best, and she is so like desperate to defend Donna and help Donna, and just in their whole family, and just doing everything. And the fact that she's kind of, she is suspicious of the Doctor, she's skeptical of the Doctor, she's annoyed that the Doctor is here because the Doctor is the danger to Donna. And the fact that everything she's doing is so clearly out of love. And she gets so many like good gags as well out of that. She's just brilliant, and it's just such a natural, organic evolution, and it's just wonderful. It's just perfect representation of just how well the noble family stuff works here. It's just anchored so well by these great characters.
Yeah, she's fantastic. The scene where she and Donna talk about being clumsy around Rose was, I think, my favorite scene of the whole episode. And I did wonder, because with Sylvia coming back, would she be like the Sylvia of series 4? But obviously she wasn't. It was the most wonderful thing ever, and I think it really works along with the themes of the rest of the episode of like this positive growth for everyone, and like having moved on from however long ago it was, 15 years, that 14 is very, very different to how 10 was, and Donna's grown and matured, and she's this wonderful lioness mother to Rose, and having Sylvia also go on a journey similar to that and arrive at this wonderful new Sylvia as like the most unexpected joy of this episode. I really, really loved her.
Sean was very wholesome too.
I've seen very many people describe him as just a himbo now.
Yeah.
A himbo. And it's like, yeah, he is. And it's like, he has that one scene in the taxi with the Doctor, and it's just charming. He's just
so nice.
He's just happy to be here, and it's great.
I love that he responded to Allons-y with "Oui, monsieur."
Like, I love that.
Just follow that. That was brilliant.
This is it gets into kind of the meta around the episode a bit, how this works. So in real life, way back when they were filming this, we saw exterior pictures of Bernard Cribbins, in a wheelchair with Tennant pushing him around. And so we know Bernard in his 90s filmed some stuff for the 60th, and of course we know Bernard tragically passed away at a very advanced age, so lived a great long life, but he's passed away. So when the episode has that conversation where he's no longer with us and Tennant gets really sad about it, I feel like it's almost, I don't think RTD was intentionally trying to like troll the audience at all. I just think it's kind of connecting with the audience awareness of, oh yeah, Bernard Cribbins died, and isn't that sad? So I think the comedy works very well as a kind of catharsis there when we reveal, oh no, he's not actually dead, and so-and-so of unit is helping him out. I think that worked really well. But for me also, it's kind of punctured in a good way that I know he filmed some stuff. So like, I wonder if for viewers who just know he died and might not know he filmed anything, if that might have felt less satisfying when you go, oh, he's still alive, which I guess is better than he's dead in a way, but like some people might think he's just off screen forever, and that might not be satisfying.
I mean, there is some suspense though, is there? Because we don't know how, like, if like he's gonna turn up in the remaining 2 episodes. Because like there's a sense that, I mean, if you look at the behind the scenes video for the Starbeast that they put on YouTube right after the episode, kind of shows him at the read through for this.
You come into a room, you've got David Tennant, you've got Catherine Tate, you've got Bernard Cribbins. I think the whole room sighed when Bernard Cribbins said his first line. All the words and all the scripts are just irrelevant until you give it to the actors. They're just what it's all about.
So the impression is kind of that maybe he was going to be in this episode but was cut out, and instead we get this bit, like maybe reshot bit of how, oh, he's off with unit. And that kind of raises the question of, well, is he going to be any of it at all? And I think he probably will, but we don't know. Like, we can't be sure. They're about to head off to see him at the end of the episode, but they get, the coffee happens. So we're still in that kind of liminal space of, will he turn up? Will it just be like I hope he does.
I feel like the only way the comedy of he's not dead, he's got a nice house set up by unit, that only works if we do see him later. Like, just in a, like, imagine like if you're RTD writing this episode and you need to write out to explain why Wilf isn't there. It feels weird to be like, oh, to like lead us on this shaggy dog trail of, oh, he's not here because he's passed away. Oh no, actually, it's because of another reason. It feels like that, I don't know, just to me it feels weird that scene exists if we're not seeing Wilf again. But I fully admit that, like, we might not, and that would be very sad, but understandable.
David Tennant and producer Phil Collinson give some clarity to this in the commentary that came out, when the episode came out.
This is where the Doctor thinks Wilf has gone.
Yeah. Oh, Bernard.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bernard was still with us when we
He was.
filmed this.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Was yet to come back onto our set as he did.
Although it was only a few days after we shot this that we did shoot with Bernard in Camden.
It was the following week.
From this to Camden.
This to Camden, yeah.
And we managed to get what turned out to be Bernard's final scene.
Bernard's final scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes all this
so poignant.
All the more poignant. But
yeah.
Well, I'm so chuffed that we got him, even briefly.
Me too.
It means a
I
lot.
think he really enjoyed it as
I think
well.
he did,
Like it felt like he really came alive in that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, all the phone calls we had with him and all that. I think it was lovely across the summer.
So they've definitely got something of him in the 60th. The way they're talking about there isn't like it didn't make it in. They've definitely got something, but they do kind of phrase it like what ended up being his last scene or so which makes me think maybe there was more that they wanted to get, but they only got that. The fact it's in Camden, like maybe there was a scheduling thing, like they shot the Starbeast stuff needed for Camden, and then maybe they shot the Toymaker stuff needed for Camden like soon after, and that's why it was a week later. All we can really suck out of that, I guess, is there is stuff we'll get. Maybe it wasn't everything they wanted.
It could be maybe stuff was resequenced, like stuff that was shot for Starbeast. So it was like, okay, how can we repurpose this and reslot it in at the end somehow? Yeah, something like that, maybe.
Possible, but I think there's a real confidence, like Missy is saying, to have stuff so set up around him. The ending of the episode, that big conversation in the middle there. I think that would have changed if they couldn't have something substantial enough to kind of work, even if it needed to be recontextualized a bit. But that's purely speculative at this point. So in the read through, which was for all 3 episodes, but he is kind of there when they seem to be reading out the first one, which is a very old man. I don't know if they would have him around the whole 3 hours reading out 3 episodes if he's only in the last one. Who knows? Anyway, I don't know how he could have even worked if he was meant to be living with them. That whole Wrarth Warrior War sequence, you can't, even if he was healthy enough originally to film the Starbeast, you can't have him scurrying around the roof. So, but you can't really get him out of that battle either, can you? So, I don't know how he could have originally, and that battle is obviously something they would have been planning for ages. So that's not something they could have changed. So yeah, it's interesting to think about, but I'm really keen to see how he factors into presumably the giggle.
What I assumed would happen is sort of a thing like how in Series 10, Smile and Thin Ice, how Smile starts with the Doctor and Bill, and the Doctor going, oh, I'm going up to my office to have a cup of tea. And Donald's like, okay. And then they have that, between now and the tea boiling, is anything in time and space. I thought they would have, this ends with them on their way to see Wilf, and then the giggle ends with them arriving at Wilf, and they have a little moment with Wilf, and that's...
Yeah.
So, like, all the specials take place, well, special 2 and 3 take place in between on the way to see Wilf, which I do hope happens. Well, anything with Wilf happens.
Yeah. A character of similar importance is Fudge, who in the comic is like Sharon, who's like the Rose equivalent's friend, and he's like a comics nerd. He's much more boisterous in the comic, but I like that he was included there, because I really liked that very RTD-ish thing of let's keep getting kind of the perspective of the regular folks on the street. I like that we kept cutting to him during the road splitting and the Wrarth battle and whatnot. I just thought that was fun. Little kid, what's the little kid experiencing in these huge events? Just a nice little perspective thing.
Yeah, he must have had a quite interesting time seeing the roads fix themselves.
Oh, that was shit, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's completely unnecessary. Okay, just play the effect backwards. Yes, the audience needs to know how the roads are fixed afterwards and make sure that everything is fine. We can't leave Camden with fucked up roads. Like, God, who cares? It's why I didn't show Donna's house magically rewinding to being fixed.
They maybe shouldn't have done it as high stakes as they did with the road. If you didn't want to do the satanic looking hellish road splits that dramatically, maybe I don't know. It just they did it so dramatically. You could have left the roads split up and then unit fixes them or whatever. Like to make them heal together, just kind of it pulls the air out of the whole drama of it. I thought it looked a bit silly.
Yeah, you could have just had the cracks be smaller or starts later. So when the Doctor stops it, there would just be less big cracks. Or you could have had a scene afterwards with a unit soldier with a wheelbarrow and some concrete. But yeah, the reversal of the cracks was just very silly.
Something else silly. This is going to sound like I'm doing some sort of rhetorical exercise, like I'm slightly playing a part here to make a point, but I seriously am not at all. The pronouns thing, I don't get how other people are reacting. Am I crazy? Like, that's a joke. That's a joke. Like, the little crazy rabbit alien is saying my pronouns are, and that's saying its ridiculous name as the definite article. That's not, like, I keep going, this bloody episode has infused, the woke gender ideology virus, and the alien has pronouns. And like, if you're going to go after the episode for ideological reasonings, you can go after like the big trans celebratory ending. I mean, don't. I prefer you didn't. But like, if you're going to go after any of it, that's the bit you can go after. If anything, this is the bit on your side, guys. This is the bit making fun of pronoun like stuff. If anything, like, I don't understand. It's a joke.
Yeah, it's like it's an attack helicopter-esque joke, isn't it? It's like,
yeah.
Oh, what are your pronouns? Oh, my pronouns are the/meep. Ha 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 ha.
Of course, it's followed up with the Doctor being like, I do that too. So it's kind of not being that mean to the meep almost, because it's just saying, well, it's just like the Doctor, isn't it?
It was a nice end bit, but those the terrible people who would want to take it that way could have, but it's clearly that they're just like the existence of the word being used is just an affront to them, that like it doesn't matter what it is.
It's probably a mix of both, but I can't tell. Are they just like, are they aware of what they're doing? Like, are they twisting it just so they can complain? Like, or like they get that it's a joke, but just the fact it's a pronoun thing, fuels the clickbait, whatever. Or are they that stupid that they don't get it's like laughing with them in a way? Like, I don't think it's like it's I don't think RTD is being a huge bigot by that joke or anything.
Oh, no.
But obviously it's kind of poking fun at pronouns, like it's being a kind of silly, self-aware thing. Are they not getting that? I'm just so confused by the reaction.
And the scene, even as it's a joke, it's still a scene that treats the concept of a pronoun as something legitimate to talk about.
Yeah.
Like when the Doctor asks like the meep, it's like, okay, good point, I'll ask the meep about that stuff. So it's not, I think it's that treatment of the concept of a pronoun with legitimacy that causes the rage. It's like that guy who like freaked out when the game Starfield lets you choose your pronoun and the character select. It's like, pronoun!
Exactly.
It's that exact same kind of just completely uncomprehending, just mindless rage and screeching and grievance. That's all it is.
It's like it's a Winter Soldier or like Pelican Donna-esque like code word, isn't it? Some people just hear the word pronoun. It's like they just see red and all reasoning just stops. I like the little Doctor thing of I do that as well. That was, a little sweet character moment.
Yeah, that was nice. And it brought it back from what could have possibly been misinterpreted. That was really nice. I did like that.
Just one more thing. If we're talking about gags, shout out to the references to Neris. I thought the Neris gags in this, obviously on top of being like a funny callback to like, as fun as as on top of it being a callback, which is nice in itself, the gags themselves are just funny in themselves. I love Neris just being like this intangible like presence, like there's this demon in Donna's life. It was all just very, very funny. I love it how worked through it is. Just a great running gag, just great stuff.
What do we think of Shirley? I know I had a go just to bring up Liz Shaw earlier, but Shirley, I really liked this stuff where she was like, "Don't make me the problem." With when the unit person was like, oh wait, you can't go up because there's stairs. I thought that she was very confident, and I love the wheelchair thing of having the like weapons in there, and we all have them. I like that because some kids are gonna go, oh wow, even my friend or that teacher in a wheelchair, they secretly have missiles there. That's pretty cool. What do you think of Shirley?
I really liked her. The scene where with the stairs and she's like, oh, don't make me the problem, just get up there. A little while ago, I think a few weeks ago, the lovely Who Cares podcast did a thing about Ryan's dyspraxia. And in that, there was discussion on how like alternative representative scenes for Ryan could have manifested him. I don't remember who it was who said, but someone said what could have happened is that because so much of Ryan's dyspraxia was centered around ladders in series 11, they could have had a scene where Ryan was like, no, I can't do a ladder today. And then what could have happened is that he could have been on the ground floor for something else important happening, or have like an important role on the ground floor to show that like, he didn't have to go up the ladder. And I thought that was like really very like so simply and so deftly done with this Shirley stuff, where she was like, oh, no, obviously I can't go up the stairs, but that's fine. You go. And then as a result, she wasn't like hypnotized by the psychedelic sun, and she could go off and then later come in and take out the possessed unit guards. And it was very like neat representation. It was just nicely done. It's nicely done.
It's a really well spotted parallel in the same sense that Chipu often made Ryan the problem in the exact way that Shirley asks not to be made the problem. You can tell that RTD has, really thoughtfully and carefully done the utmost to make Shirley like this really like stand out and like positive and like capable and like nuanced as well. Just kind of he wants to do like the ideal, like what would a character in a wheelchair be like in Doctor Who, and how could that be really affirming for wheelchair users. And he's put a lot of thought into that, and you can tell. I fully expect to see her using her wheelchair gadgets in whatever spin-off she eventually gets, because that seems like the point there, to be honest.
And I really like it. I do hope, well, not hope, because it's clear and obvious, but I am excited to see more of her in Shooty Who and whatever spin-off she
The War Between
becomes a part of. The War Between.
Yeah, I've seen discontent with in some people from how easily the Doctor started opening up to Shirley and how quickly they got on together. I thought that made sense to me because we saw him sneaking around the unit guys and avoiding the rest of the unit soldiers and stuff. But as soon as the scientific advisor came up to talk to him, he was very easily and quickly quite open with her. And I think it's because the scientific advisor role is someone who has an innate link and kinship with the Doctor. They aren't one of the gun-toting, muscle heads. So this is someone who is about analysing and thinking. So there's always going to be a commonality there, even if they've never met each other before. So I liked that they just had an immediate, easy dynamic. She knows what's going on. She knows what kind of thing happens with the Doctor. So we can talk to her about stuff, and she will listen. She will understand. She'll even have some ideas of her own. She suggested that it's Donna making all this happen. Obviously she isn't, but that's her being tuned into what kind of things could be happening. So yeah, and I like that they could have a bit of banter there. It felt natural. Didn't feel forced or anything like that.
I didn't like it as much. I like the idea that the Doctor would have an immediate kinship with the scientific advisor, and I really liked the bit where, while explaining the problem, he was like, "I'm the Doctor." And she's like, "Yeah, you look like the Doctor." And she assumed he was 10. She's like, "Yeah, I've seen your photo on the files." But it just felt to me, it felt really hollow not hollow, it felt weird that it was bouncing between, "Hello, nice to meet you," and plot stuff. Not in a, I didn't like that they were fast friends, and just that the dialogue itself was a little clunky for me. But I like the idea.
And one important note there is that as she wheels off at the end, and she tells him just stay there. We'll handle this. Stay there. And the Doctor's like, "Oh, did you bet your whole life to say that?" And she's like, "You wish." So it's sort of like that, kind of poking the whole idea of unit people fanboying over the Doctor or fangirling over the Doctor. That I guess we saw a lot with Osgood or not to diss Osgood because I love Osgood. I would really love if Osgood came back. But I think in the sense of consciously, I think it's good that they have a dynamic there, which is that she is not starry-eyed about the Doctor. She is she can be a friend to the Doctor without being a worshipper of the Doctor or anything like that. I think that's a good basis to move forward with those two characters.
There's a weird thing that annoys me, and this kind of links back to the Series 9 thing we had earlier, and it's about the Doctor's face.
First time we've gone back to a Doctor, how did you sort of square that circle in your head, how you could make it work?
Oh, I didn't worry about that for a second. It's just so Jodie Whittaker becomes David Tennant. It's once you think that, it's there's no rules. You can do absolutely everything you want. I kind of knew people would be fans complaining about that. You can't do that. Every time someone says you can't do that, that's exactly where you should go.
Never mind the ferret from Mars. Who the hell are you?
It's funny, he's an old Doctor, he's played the Doctor before, but this has never happened. The Doctor's never got his face back before, or her face back before, so that's fascinating. It's a plot that runs throughout the 3 hours. Why has this happened? And leads towards the most extraordinary ending, which is a scene we've never played before in the whole 60 years of Doctor Who. So that's what I mean, new areas, new territory, new thoughts, new lines, new ideas. That's always the right place to be.
There's 3 thoughts there. 1, there are no rules. If someone's saying you can't do that, that's probably an interesting thing to do. Love that. 2, this has never been done before. 3, this is leading towards the most extraordinary ending, something we've never done, the whole 60 years of Doctor Who. This sounds like I'm doing that Liz Shaw thing again, and I'm being a really annoying fan, but I'm not. 10 years ago, in the 50th anniversary, one of the hugest moments of the 50th anniversary was this very thing happening. It was when Tom Baker came back, and he wasn't as a past Doctor, he was as a future Doctor, and he had a whole conversation with Matt Smith. This is a very widely watched and beloved scene where he's saying you'll revisit, in some time to come, you might revisit a few faces, but just the old favourites. So this is not an obscure Capaldi era-esque little lore beat. This is at the ending of the huge, magnificent 50th anniversary 10 years ago. I'm not trying to like, oh, RTD, you simply forgot the. I'm not trying to like be a nerd there. I just kind of like it's supporting RTD. There, like this has happened before and it was really cool. And I think it's cool that 10 years later we're revisiting the same idea. I think that's really awesome. I'm just kind of confused. Like I keep seeing people not bring up the Curator, and I'm like, this idea has already happened, and it was really cool then, and I think it's cool now.
But what RTD is doing is fundamentally different, I think, in a very big way, which is that this is the incumbent Doctor. This is not like a future thing who has already happened for. We're seeing this happen to the Doctor now, properly, and this is the first time it's actually happened to them now. Like the Curator, God knows how many times it might have happened to the Curator by then, by the time the Doctor becomes the Curator. That's all way off over there. And that is someone popping in for a cameo. This is the actual incumbent Doctor having this regression happen to them now for the first time as the actual lead of the show. So this is the first time that's happened. I think that is a big deal. I don't think RTD is wrong to talk about it the way he does. I think it would have been nice if they name dropped the Curator as just like seeding this idea, because they did do that. But I don't think it's like whatever. The idea stands by itself, even if you ignore the Curator, to be honest. I would say something that does seem to be in conversation with this, and maybe isn't getting talked up as much. We had the whole thing of like, where did this face come from with Series 9? In The Girl Who Died, we had it was a David Tennant episode, Fires of Pompeii, that turned out to be like the source of this. So I wonder, this whole idea of there must be a reason for this face being here, that was very heavily done, like with Capaldi, and this question of like, where did I get this face? So that feels like it could be a direct conversation with Moff Who. Even if it's not like alluded to being that, I think it's inevitably going to be that to some extent. This idea that the Doctor's body might be giving them a message, or like bringing something, or like demanding something happen through the use of like a face or a persona.
I think To Say Goodbye was a perfectly satisfactory explanation for me. That I know it doesn't like hook into the power of the Doctor or anything, but it's not like Matt Smith turning into Capaldi was like it's not like Matt Smith was thinking of the fires of Pompeii as he regenerated. Like I like the idea that when the Doctor regenerates, just a kind of ripple from the past might influence their psyche, which influences who they become. So Donna, like saying maybe, just to say goodbye, maybe part of the Doctor's brain when he was 13, just kind of still banging around. He never quite resolved this situation with this person that he loved. So that was explanation enough for me. And RTD saying this is going to run through all 3 specials. So I hope when it's explained more, it's not too convoluted, because I was perfectly happy with that explanation.
Well, that final conversation that 14 and Donna have kind of undercuts the say goodbye thing, because the Donna's like, why do you always have to be saying goodbye? Why can't you just stay and actually like live, have some fun like, with us, hang out with us, visit, have tea, do all those things, instead of like going off to nobly disappear and die and lose everything again. So I think the reason it's not to say goodbye is that RTD doesn't find that to be a satisfactory explanation, and that the truth is something like bigger and more like almost important, like for the Doctor, that we will eventually see whatever that happens at the end of the giggle.
Which would disappoint me, because I'm in agreement with Neo. I found that very satisfying, and it's maybe not the most like bombastic, big, exciting thing, but it's characterily really nice and satisfying.
The 11th Doctor ended his life by staying in the same place for forever, for centuries. And then the 12th Doctor spent decades with River, at the same place. And so there's been kind of these increasing bounds of the 10th Doctor lived a very short life, and then successor Doctors have lived long lives in certain places for a while. So I guess we are kind of building up. What Donna's saying at the end there, now more than ever, it's something to actually think about, I guess, for him, that, well, I have kind of stayed in some places for a while. Can I do that more? Would I be interested in that? Could I do a good job of that? How would that work? So very, very interesting conversation there. I really love that dialogue, because I also think what we're inching towards there one way or another is RTD says we're going to do something extraordinary that we haven't done before. I think the idea of letting go and retiring and the show not needing to propel itself forward breathlessly the way it had to in the 10th Doctor era so much, I think that's really interesting. Sometimes the revolution can be to stop or, to slow down instead of to keep going. So I'm very curious how that'll pan out.
Maybe the face didn't come back to say goodbye, but to say hello.
Yeah.
Maybe that is the point, and it's just the inversion.
Yeah. Okay. That was a nice bit to do the ending we talked about. A slightly lamer bit we should talk about is the boss.
And now another cryptic line here.
Do you now know what this
yes.
means?
I do.
I don't.
Because there's one more thing.
Still cryptic
You'll
to
get
me.
to find out with all the viewers.
Yeah.
I know everyone's assuming the boss is the maker of toys and it'll tie into the giggle. Unless they were just like playing around there, that implication to me seems more it's after Tenet, so it's like a shooty era thing.
Yeah, that's what I guess. It doesn't really make sense for the toy maker to have like a meat underling. To be honest, doesn't really. If you think about it for 2 seconds, it doesn't actually make sense. So yeah, it's probably something else.
Yeah,
and it also makes the specials feel kind of like lame. Like, oh, the meep's working for the toy maker is like less interesting than the meep not working for the toy maker. So I'm glad that the boss isn't the toy maker, because I did roll my eyes when that happened, assuming that.
Why does the meep have a boss at all? That doesn't really work for me.
It's just so lame. It's just one of those things, like, we need the series arc tease here, even if it's not in character for the meep, even if it doesn't really make sense or add anything to the meep. We just need a stupid, like, cryptic line for the sake of being cryptic. I mean, it's not a very cryptic line. Like, it's just the word the boss. There's no crypticism there. There's no lyricism there. It's not like encoded. It's saying, I have a boss. I will tell them. It's not actually cryptic at all. It's like just the most perfunctory kind of series arc tease you could possibly do. I think it was just a disappointingly lazy choice from RTD there, if I'm honest.
And speaking of the crypticism, I did not like that. Oh, cryptic. Oh, not a fan of that, or whatever he said. Because it was like lampshading, like nothing. It's like, if you don't, like, just have it be cryptic. If you got, it's not even cryptic, like you just said, but like, you can just have that. Having the Doctor like snipe at it was like equally as lame as the line itself.
Yeah, it's like non-humor. You're just pointing to what you've just done as if that's a joke. It's not. It's not. And if you're very, very like lizard brain, fan brain, then you're the kind of person who might laugh whenever the script points to something it just did. Like, haha, I did thing, and then it said it did thing. But it's not actually comedy.
The last clip I've got is RTD talking about what the show can do.
And that's a new future. That Rose goes beyond words, beyond definitions. And it is important. I think that visibility thing I said before is, like, as you were saying, if you grow up seeing this stuff, homophobia and transphobia happens when it's something you've never seen before. You can temper that reaction and change it if you introduce these images to people happily and normally and calmly when they're young. Then it just becomes normal. It is normal. I don't need to say it's normal, but that normality just becomes part of your world. You're not stressed, you don't freak, you don't react, you haven't lost anything, you don't hate anything. It's a better world.
Thoughts?
Well, yeah, he's right. It's just positive representation. It's a positive, has like a real world life positive effect on society if people watch things and experience things and people and cultures and ways of living that they might not otherwise have been aware of or part of. That's just fundamentally a good thing, always.
I'm going to split hairs. I'm going to take slight issue with what he says about where homophobia and transphobia comes from, because I think the idea that it just comes from, well, just being unfamiliar with them, I think that's a little bit too generous. Because I think often, like in some ways, I think often people react. I think the natural state of people is actually to be kind of open to things and like understand things. Like, you know, children just accept things, they understand things. I think often with like discrimination types of like racism and homophobia and things like that, there are often forces kind of like inculcating that or creating that. And there are ways that things can regress because people can be okay with things at one point and then they can be basically made almost to start hating them where they didn't before. And so that's not a case of not being familiar with the thing. That's a case of suddenly having something else that you need to direct onto like a scapegoat or like a target. So there are worse and darker forces, I think, behind like phobias and stuff and bigotry than just an innocent lack of understanding. So yeah, I think the solution needs to be like more encompassing. But it's fine. I'm not like demanding RT. I demand a full thorough analysis on Doctor Who Unleashed. You charlatan. No. I'm saying I think the kind of like the doe-eyed perspective that RT gives here is maybe a little bit incomplete.
Yeah, I agree, but yeah, I agree also. It's maybe not the place to, condemn some of your audiences like hopeless and whatnot, but yeah. I mean, this is kind of the role he can play where he is, running a big family show is to do this positive representation. That's what he can do and he can do well. So I like that he's very aware of this show as a force. Like he's not just doing this to do this, and he's not just doing this to fill up the schedule. He's got things he wants to accomplish through the show. And I think that's exciting because that's a kind of propulsive thing. And he's got things he wants to do and, that's going to energize him to do it. We got Doctor Who Unleashed. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off here. The host makes a comment about sound and boom mics. Does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes, he does. Well, I mean, I think I know which one you're talking about. The one where he says it doesn't look that hard.
Yeah.
So Harad's about to boom this scene. She's in charge of the sound on David Tennant. So I'm watching for tips. Can't be that hard, can it? It's just probably gonna stick.
As someone who's worked in sound, has been a boom operator many times, how very absolutely dare he? But actually, no, it's kind of like a messy, like, I understand the comedy is like kind of like gentle ribbingy bantery stuff, but it's also like just like putting down that crew member randomly.
I know like the function of that whole segment is like check out this cool job and this cool person doing the cool job, but yeah, that's just I don't know why the editor left that line in. There's just like this oddly dismissive line.
I think a lot of the humor in Unleashed is a bit weird in that way. I was after the Destination Skara thing, I thought that, and even more so after this one, a lot of it is that kind of, it's weird humor where it's like a lot of the banter between David Tennant and the host is like, the host asks a question and David Tennant is like, you idiot. And it's like, okay, thanks for that. But this is weird behind the scenes stuff, and as a weird energy to it, I think.
Yeah, there's this tangible sense that Stephen Powell, the host, is not an insider, not actually part of the thing. So he was always like hovering around and not quite like being like integrated as part of the team, part of the experience. So he's this weird position where he's kind of hovering around the edges of a conversation and trying to like ingratiate himself and trying to be funny with the cast and crew, and it's not really necessarily working all that well. And then you have, I'm just watching through the whole of Unleashed. I was wondering where the fuck Rachel Talalay was, because she's not in Unleashed at all.
Yeah.
She's in the behind the scenes extra bit they put on YouTube. Thank God. But she's completely absent. She's absent from Unleashed. So I was watching the whole thing, waiting, when's she going to turn up? Where's Rachel? Where's the fucking director of the episode? And we said we get this Stefan's work experience. Hey, check out Stefan bumbling around, holding the boom mic and just kind of LARPing for like 5 seconds as a boom operator. And to kind of like, oh, I get it. It's like he's trying out for this job that this actual woman has with the actual job. And it just felt like this is just such a farce. Like, why are we doing this? Like, God, it's just a very, really awkward and kind of indirect way of doing the whole teaching about jobs and stuff through the show. Just with the kind of awkward host figure just bumbling and everything.
This and the official Doctor Who podcast both to me feel like a sense of like content first. We're like, oh, we'll do this and then we'll do this, and then later on having to figure out, oh, what do we actually fill these with? It's like we just had the idea for them and now we've got to actually fill them with like material, because a lot of it feels like really superfluous. And like, not that there's nothing wrong with like extra content being superfluous. It's like sometimes it's fun to just like have little bits like that, but not interesting stuff is the issue with it.
On the Destination Skaro Unleashed, the host and Tennant had this exchange where the host like says, oh, the Daleks, your friends are here, and Tennant's like, enemies really. And then the host says, I know that. I was being thingy, you know.
Now, it is hard to talk about Davros without mentioning the Daleks.
Being back reunited with your old friends, the Dalek.
Well, they're not old friends.
Well, I know that. I was being thingy, you know?
It was at that moment I just kind of lost faith in Unleashed.
Yeah.
Like that's the one they shot after already doing a run of Unleashed, like, because they did Destination Skaro, like a year later. But look, Confidential was not perfect. There was actually a lot I hated about Confidential, and I think I have a fairly equal amount I like and dislike so far in them. Confidential is just, I don't want to insult, like, I know lots of people have nostalgia for Confidential. I watched the first 3 series of it, like, as they happened as well. But, like, how Confidential works is, you get genuinely interesting bits of interviews from RTD, then you get, like, a genuinely interesting run-through of some kind of technical aspect of how the show is made. Eventually, the show had kind of covered so many of the jobs that go into making the show that it just became the Matt, Arthur, Karen hangout 40 minutes. But in between the RTD stuff that's interesting, the actor interviews that are interesting, and the like crew interviews that are interesting, you would get these absolutely interminable, endless sequences of the classic actors, just talking, well, in my day, the Cybermen, the sets were wobbly. And then, like, these awful montages of, like, classic Who and, bits of Series 1, like in the first one, set to these awful British pop songs from the 2000s, and it would never end. And every episode of Confidential did it. And Unleashed isn't doing any of that. Unleashed doesn't feel like filler to me. Sometimes it feels to me like, I don't think this was the most interesting thing you could have filmed, but I never feel like it's actually wasting my time. Like I felt Confidential was always wasting my time. Am I a hater? Do you guys like Confidential more than I did?
I've actually only ever seen like one episode of Confidential, so I can't talk on that.
I was never a big Confidential viewer either. I think you're basically right. I think like Unleashed is more structured and deliberate and modern in ways that are very intentional. I'm just like still like not like massively in love with like how it's being executed so far. I'm sure potentially there'll be lots of room for variation if nothing else.
Yeah, and I am like basically like I've like shat on it constantly, but I am like basically like fine with it. I don't mind it.
Yeah, we're being greedy children here. Like I love that we're getting this at all, but this is an era we're allowed to be poking at because it's got the strength to take it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the show is not fundamentally broken anymore. So even if I passionately hate things about it, like the fucking title sequence, so it just feels like, yeah, well, that's a thing. That could be better. Yeah, I don't like that. Yeah, and it's not like the stakes are so much lower. So these are just irritations rather than sources of misery. Right? They are not part of a wider underlying malaise. There is no wider underlying malaise. The show is fine. It's fine. And that is such a relief.
The in-vision commentaries, I think, I love commentaries in general. Of course, you know, how many hours on Chibnall commentaries did we do? We love commentaries here.
A lot.
We love in-vision commentaries as well, the ones where you can actually see them talking. My two irritations with that, one, what's the point of an in-vision commentary when it's not in-vision the whole time? Like if I wanted to watch the episode, I would watch the episode. Like there's no point where I don't want to see Phil Collinson's face. I don't say that every day. But when I'm watching one of these, there's no point where I don't want to watch him and how he's reacting. So I don't get the point of taking his face away at certain points. And two, there's another show I like that, how to put this? There's a show I like, I guess the Doctor Who connection is, earlier when I was complaining about doubling up on concepts, this show kind of does the opposite of that, to the enragement of some people. It combines concepts that are similar. There was an episode of it where a co-author of the stuff the show is based on watched the episode for the first time next to two fans, and it was the first time they watched this episode, which was the finale to that season. And some fan consternation and drama happened because the co-author spoke all the way through the episode because he'd already read the script to it. And so the whole way through he was talking, whereas the two fans, where it was the first time they're watching the episode, people were like, well, you've just ruined their experience of the episode because how are they meant to have a positive experience when you were just giving negative commentary the whole time? Anyway, that was Tennant's first time watching the episode, was in that in-vision commentary next to the two producers.
Oh shit, okay.
And the VFX weren't finished, so that wasn't like a complete final, but it was locked, the episode, and it was just VFX changing was the last thing. And so I know actors and producers, they're very busy people, but I think it's sometimes tricky if it's their first time watching kind of the final version of it, sometimes it's kind of, they might not want to talk the whole time, or the things they say might just become kind of, oh, wow, look how that looks now. Like so many of these commentaries just become, oh, look, the VFX look better now, which is, yeah. But it was a big rush. I know Russell was meant to be in all the in-vision commentaries for the 60th, but something came up or something, and it was only in Maker of Toyses. So, yeah.
Yeah, it being Tennant's first time kind of changes it from like a commentary to like a Tennant reaction video.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good comparison.
Which can be fun in its own way, but it's not what you want from a commentary.
The concept art, some of the behind the scenes stuff had different images of the Meep, and there were different ideas for the Wrarth Warriors. We talked about this on the Star Beast comic discussion as well, but it's interesting that everything just pulled back to being super close to the comic in the end, which sounds like it was an RTD directive. Some of those other Meeps looked interesting, but I'm glad we went so back to, you're not going to improve Dave Gibbons, so I think it was a good idea to keep close.
Some of those concept Meeps just looked like Stitch again.
Yeah.
Like from Lilo and Stitch. Like, what were they thinking? I do wonder. I mean, I guess you've got to produce different designs just for the sake of, having different designs, like different options. So these are all the things we could do. Even if you're not necessarily like, oh, we will do this, or we will do this, we must do this. But still, you do wonder, what were they even thinking? Some of them, why even change something that's so good?
Now, and this is very appropriate because it's literally what we're about to talk about. Now we're picking back up a couple of days after we recorded that main discussion, just for a last bit of discussion on some new things that have happened. Mainly being I read the novelisation, and I want to talk about that a little bit. The novelisation came out a few days after the actual episode. That's how they're doing with these 60th anniversary novelisations. I don't know how they'll do it with Shooty's Season 1, because Russell on Instagram recently said there will be some novelisations for that as well. But for now, the 60th, the novels come out a couple of days after the episode, and then we go into the next episode, and so on. But something else came out recently, which I thought was pretty interesting, because we kind of were talking... I'll just say what it is. So someone on Twitter said, crazy how these shots are all from the same director. And it was 4 shots from Talalay episodes. Lovely shot from The Doctor Falls, lovely shot from Heaven Sent, lovely shot from Hellbent, and then the weather report shot from The Star Beast. The really weird video game character selection screen shot of 14 just standing like he's floating in outer space. And Rachel Talalay replied to that Twitter post saying, not number 4, nope. So she clarified a little bit in another tweet in that thread where she was asked, out of interest, who did direct that opening then? And Talalay says, no idea. The shots of Donna in the kitchen were outtakes within the episode. It's not uncommon for recaps to not include the director, although this is not exactly a recap. So, Gig and Missy, what do you think of that Talalay stuff?
I mean, I was not surprised in the slightest. You know, I could have told you straight away that intro was obviously not done by the same director as the rest of the episode. It was clearly a last-minute addition, and there was basically no way in hell that a last-minute, no-budget addition like that would involve getting the original director back to shoot it. I mean, it just doesn't make logistical sense. So I think it was a bit absurd of people to even assume that Talalay was responsible, but I'm glad that she has clarified what was already very obvious.
Yeah, I too thought it was imminently obvious that it wasn't her, but the bit I did find interesting was that the shots of Donna being outtakes from the episode.
Yeah.
Because that's weird. Where did those, like, what was the original plan for those shots? Where were they going to go?
Yeah, that is weird.
But obviously the video game stuff is just so far away from anything.
The Donna outtakes are still kind of, they're, you know, her talking to camera. So I guess it's some vestigial idea from shooting at some stage, but the weather report from 14 is the newer thing, I guess. What do you think, Gig?
Yeah. I mean, I'm mildly surprised to learn that the Donna bits were maybe shot during the actual thing, but yeah, it's, I guess there's all kinds of things that they could have been from. I mean, you could do basically anything, I guess. Maybe it was for another hypothetical intro, or maybe they're going to be used for something else. They just have to do it on the same set as, I don't know.
An ad or a trailer or something, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of vestigial remnants, those are often what you find in novelizations, because sometimes novelizations are based on earlier scripts, like Paul Cornell's terrible Twice Upon a Time novelization pulls from some of the big earlier script Moffat had done for Twice Upon a Time. I really don't recommend that one. I think it does a lot of things wrong. I don't even like that episode much, and if there was a way to make it worse, Cornell found it. Anyway, what he does to Bill is just insane. Anyway, that's getting off topic. Gary Russell, good old Gary Russell. I don't know really how to describe Gary Russell. He's kind of been around forever. Used to run Big Finish. He's done a million things in the extended universe. As a writer, he's not Alan Barnes or Nick Briggs, but he's not really... I don't know if you guys have much experience with him.
Did he do Zagreus? Was that him? That
was him and Alan Barnes.
Right. Okay, so sort of a mixture. He was involved.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a voice. Yeah, that's a guy with a voice. Certainly. He's not like an anonymous, just sort of words machine.
Yeah, he's a weird one, but he has a voice. Yeah, he has some sort of authorial vision of some sort. Yeah. Anyway, he's doing this first Star Beast book. And that's kind of fun because the Star Beast, of course, was a comic first. And when we had our comic chat, we went through all the different colorizations and how it changed. And it was, bound in different ways and reprinted in America. And then it became an audio drama. And then it became a TV episode. And now the TV episode's become a book. It's very, that conversation in Deep Breath, the Ship of Theseus thing, isn't it? We've really transformed this story.
Yeah, and soon the book will be an audiobook later on once it gets an official release.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So I read it quickly, and it's not, sometimes in these Target novelizations, they have like radically different things. Like David Whittaker's Daleks novelization starts the whole show in a completely different way. Some of the McCoy ones were like proto Virgin New Adventures and setting up lots of lore and whatnot. Some of the novelizations do big swings. This one doesn't really do any huge swings, but it's interesting to me the stuff that's not in there, and some of the extra stuff it kind of shades in. I believe, Gig, you've seen excerpts of it, and Missy, I don't think you've seen any of it. Am I right?
Actually, I read like half of it this morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't really like it though.
Well, I'll just go through. I'll bring up all the stuff I want to go through, which is just in order through the chapters. So chapter 1, The Hunt, we of course start with, well, not of course, because this surprised me, in the Stolen Earth, the first part of the Series 4 finale. And of course, these specials are all, linking back to the Series 4 finale. They're like a sequel to it. It starts with a milkman whose milk is all shaking, and Donna and the Doctor zap off in the TARDIS, and his milk is shaking because Earth's getting stolen, and then the planet's in the sky. And then his milk all shatters, and then Rose Tyler zaps in from the other universe and says some badass line in a strangely new accent. And, cut to titles. This milkman has become like the kind of hero of this novel, because sometimes the novelizations take minor characters within the show, or they kind of invent new characters and they kind of use them in a novelty way to add a new perspective. Russell T Davies' Rose novel did that in a really cool way with how it started. So Missy, if you've read the first half, what do you think of how it's using the milkman, Stu Ferguson, as a kind of new window into the Starbeast story? So he meets 14 and he works as a cleaner at the steelworks, so he factors into lots of different things in the episode.
It made me think of a lot of the stuff that happened in RTD1, where things were always very neatly connected in ways that they were kind of, oh, that's neat if you just look on the surface, but then when you thought about it, it made everything feel a bit smaller. There's so much coincidence around, what's his name? Stu. There's so much coincidence around him that it just feels much less interesting. He's right there for the whole time through the he bumps into 14 in Camden, and then he works at the steelworks, and then also his best friend he's on his way to meet is the guy that they sneak through when they're escaping the shootout in Donna's street. And so it was it was a series of just me going, oh, that's neat, oh, that's neat, oh no, it's a little all too tied together to be that interesting.
I like that. It's like a little like a Tom Stoppard, there's these characters in the back of the episode, you never really saw them. I like when the novelizations do that, personally. I think it's a bit of fun. It's something different, so how the actual episode worked.
I do think the decision to make it the milkman from Stolen Earth just feels like this sort of fan brain kind of thing. And it's kind of almost overly this kind of self-congratulation that fans of the show have, where they can fixate on a small thing and then turn that fixation into something to celebrate in itself, rather than something with any actual content to it. It's just one of those things. I mean, I'm not generally sympathetic to little fan tics in the first place, so it's the kind of thing that's going to annoy me irrationally, rather than to please me.
Anyway, in this first scene, 14 tells Stu, if that was my box, it wouldn't have just kicked me out. It wouldn't have dumped me here and locked its doors without so much as a... So there's a kind of suggestion, well, an explication that the TARDIS kicked 14 out at the start, maybe to regenerate itself. Anyway, 14 and Stu have this exchange where Stu is saying, lost my job that day, I was a milkman back then, and planets in the sky. The stranger seemed very dismissive. One of those it never happened lot, are you? Well, it did happen, Stu said angrily. Cost me everything. Lots of people died, and... The stranger suddenly touched Stu's arm. It's all right, he said softly. It was a long time ago. And then Stu starts feeling good about himself and he starts whistling. So 14's done some kind of psychic thing to him to make him feel less aggrieved over the events of Series 4. Well, I guess isn't that what this episode's trying to do for fans in general? So that's interesting.
Random? She used random Time Lord mind tricks on this complete stranger. This is an interesting intervention here.
Then 14 walking around Camden, he has... all this anaphora about he loves crowds, he loves city, he loves people, he loves London, so 14's getting a very bubbly characterization. And then there's something, Missy, maybe you understood this. There's a paragraph here which feels like a continuity reference to me, and I don't get it at all. It's when the Doctor is saying how Londoners don't like eye contact, and he says, he recalled once getting on a London bus. He'd said hello to the driver who didn't do anything but grunt. He had sat down next to a nice lady with a bit of shopping. She'd shuffled her shopping aside so he could sit better. He had thanked her and then started talking about the weather. Londoners always talk about the weather. And the awful traffic, another popular subject. And then he started explaining where he was going. And it keeps going on about the situation. Was that a situation in the show or something? Because I didn't get that.
I thought, the first thing I thought of was Planet of the Dead when he gets on with his Easter egg, but that's not what happens in Planet of the Dead. So I just assumed it was just an off-screen instance, or off any story instance of the Doctor on the bus. Yeah, it does ramble.
Gig, you don't recognise a time the Doctor sat on a bus?
I don't recognise anything like that. It sounds like just a made-up anecdote to fill a bit of word count, if I'm honest, because I think sometimes with novelisation authors, they just they wander off down side streets regardless of whether or not it's all that relevant. They just find kind of any opportunity they can.
When the space plane is crashing, the Doctor and Rose... Well, what happens is the Doctor pulls the sonic out, and in the novel it says, drew a square in midair, which immediately became a 3D display showing the plummeting spacecraft up against the sky. Interesting, said the Doctor. How did you do that? Asked Rose. Do you know, I'm not entirely sure. He tapped at the bottom right area of the screen and pinched with his fingers. Immediately the image changed and they could see the spacecraft close up. It was long and glittering blue, but ruptured down the side, smoke billowing out of it. That's a spaceship, Rose breathed. So he doesn't do that in the episode, but in the book he makes his little sonic screeny thing and Rose looks at it. And then when Donna and Rose are leaving, Rose asks, how did you do? And she makes the shape of the screen in the air. The Doctor smiled at her. I just did, he replied without replying at all. She smiled back like they had a shared secret between them, and then she was gone after Donna. So there's a little more Rose 14 connection in the book.
The detail of the Doctor not knowing how he did that thing with the sonic feels like one of those things where the author is maybe trying to draw attention to something that the episode, the TV script doesn't actually care about. Like, in the episode, the Doctor gets his new sonic and does all these new things, and there's no addressing of how, like, new or odd that is, or where or when he learnt that. I mean, it's the kind of thing that maybe fans would need some kind of meta acknowledgement of. Like, to have insert a line where the Doctor goes, oh, I don't know how I did that, or I guess I just do now. And it's just, it's not really necessary, I think. But, you know, whatever.
Every chapter of the book ends with, like, a little extra text thing. Sometimes they're text messages, sometimes they're memos. Some are quite fun. The first one isn't fun. It's just a Ministry of Defense denial of a journalist requesting information about the UFO crash. Then chapter 2 is called The Star Beast, so it's Stu inside the steelworks when the space plane crashes. And then I like this little exchange about Billy. So it's after a moment, this is the Doctor's inside the place and he's talking to Stu. Yes, that doesn't happen in the episode. After a moment, Stu nodded. Somehow he felt that this guy had a way of making him feel relaxed. I just need to get away from here. Tell my mate Billy McPherson about all this. He won't believe me. Why not? He'll have slept through it all. The Doctor seemed to drift for a moment, as if something was on his mind. Tell me about it. I've got a mate just like that. She misses all the fun. Then he glanced back outside. Now quickly tell me everything. I don't think either of you will like this, but I kind of like that we're reframing that sleeping guy in the episode that everyone walks past when they're getting out of the street. I like that we're reframing him as like a parallel to Donna not noticing all the alien stuff to like her family and the Doctor, and then that sleeping guy was actually that to another character. I think that's fun, but I don't think that's what you guys like. Am I right?
It is kind of like funny that like there's just an alternate perspective where like Stu's the protagonist of his own Star Beast story and he has his own Donna who's missing it all. But I mean, I don't feel strongly either way about it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say you get like a prize for noticing a vague parallel between two things in the script. Like, well done, you know, okay.
Then the book does some more London expansion in general. It talks for a bit about the Flatwood near Rose's place and goes into its history and whatnot. It has a little more Wilf characterization. When Sylvia's kind of thinking to herself about her life, it says, then Eileen, Sylvia's mum, had passed away and her dad Wilfred had needed somewhere to live, so she and Jeff and Donna had bought a bigger house up on Wessex Avenue so Wilf could move in. Dad, at the time, was making a few quid by running a newspaper stand near the school at Parkvale, but after a bunch of boys set it alight one Sunday morning, simply because he sold copies of the Muslim News and Emil magazine, Wilf chucked it all in and retired to focus his energies on his allotment and his telescope.
Wow.
So there's a character reason for why he stopped doing the Voyage of the Damned job.
I wonder if all of this sort of noble family law stuff is like... I wonder if there's any like RTD consultation involved. I mean, I feel like there wouldn't be. It feels like the sort of thing you just sort of... They could just let the author kind of go wild with, because you know, whatever you make up will probably fit somehow. Like, we have clear enough ideas of who these characters are and what they're like, right? So what we hear about Wilf doesn't sound like particularly out of the realm of like plausibility for him.
Then, shortly after that is the kind of longest stretch of the book doing something quite interesting, where it's Sylvia's internal thoughts about how she treats Donna. It's quite an interesting section. So it's Sylvia thinking through, you know, Journey's End when Donna gets returned to her and Wilf. And In the book, it says, all Sylvia knew was that the doctor had done something to Donna that had cost her all her memories, all her experiences with him. Despite Sylvia knowing those things were dangerous and probably frightening, she had to concede the doctor had brought something good, no, great, out of her daughter for the first time, and it was all gone as a result of whatever had happened up there in outer space. So for the past 15 years, ever since the wedding to lovely Sean, then it goes on about how Sylvia's made Donna avoid everything, to do with space and sci-fi movies and everything like that, and how she had worked with a friend and Wilf to even erase stuff on her Facebook to get rid of Lance and all these other, things that could potentially trigger Donna's brain blowing up. And then Sylvia thinking about how Donna hasn't been able to keep a job. And this bit's really interesting. So it's Donna, however, hadn't been able to keep a job. Sylvia felt awful because she moaned and complained about the lack of success, but of course knew the real reason was that something inside her daughter's soul had been taken away forever. Of course, Sylvia could never let Donna know, so she had to maintain this pretense that she still thought of her as willfully lazy and incompetent. For Sylvia, every time she saw Donna, she felt a wave of sadness at what had been lost. Then it goes into all these memories of Donna as a child, and it's, just Sylvia thinking about what a great person she is, all these great things she's done as a child and a teenager, and all these very characterful things to do with young Donna. And now, all these years later, the daughter with whom she clashed all the time, every single waspish comment that they made to one another, every time one of them stomped out of whichever home they were arguing in, just tore open the scar on Sylvia's wounded heart. How much she wanted to tell Donna the truth, to tell her she'd been brilliant, she had saved the entire universe. But instead she had to play the harpy, the nagging, ungrateful, selfish mum, because if she didn't, Donna's brain would burn and she would die, in agony. And Sylvia hated herself for it. But good God, she hated the doctor even more, and swore to Wilf if that man ever turned up again, she'd smack him so hard that she'd knock him into next week, time traveller or not. The interesting stuff there is, that's some Sylvia characterization that's kind of, interesting. But also, her thinking Donna can't get a job because she's been robbed of something from Series 4 is interesting, because Donna wasn't great at holding down a job before Series 4 as well. So for Sylvia to kind of think now that Donna's a failure because something's been taken from her rather than she's inherently a failure is interesting.
Okay. I mean, there's something I don't like here, which is this idea that Sylvia is pretending to be horrible to Donna because of fear that it will trigger her memories otherwise. And this whole idea that Sylvia still has gone through her whole life still being horrible to Donna, but just as a pretense. Because I didn't see any of that in the actual episode. In the actual episode, we see Sylvia has clearly grown as a person and is being, is actually being a much more nice and affirming, validating mother to Donna. Maybe not perfect, but certainly it seems like she's grown. There's no sense that she is doing the kind of old Sylvia as a pretense. And I don't really get the logic that she would even need to. This feels like a really clearly Russell is going for extra tragedy here.
Gary Russell.
But I don't think it makes an enormous amount of sense. It just... Yeah, Gary Russell, of course, not Russell T Davies. the other one. Yeah, but this feels like a really weird sort of kind of moving around the Lego bricks in the story without actually making much sense of it. It feels like an attempt to fix something that doesn't need fixing. It was already fixed.
Yeah, I also felt weird feelings reading all of that stuff because it doesn't map onto the episode proper. But also it felt similar to those cheeky referential comments of the 14 not knowing exactly how the sonic work, where there feels like a need to expand upon things for seemingly no reason. It's we need Gary Russell needed this deep dive into Sylvia that, like you said, doesn't pan onto how she acts at all. We don't see that she's still being awful to Donna, but it's this weird needing to go back and explain why Sylvia was mean to Donna, but not explaining it in Series 4, just explaining it in the gap that we didn't see where she wasn't being like that. So it just felt really awkward.
What's the deal with the thinking Donna can't get a job because she's been robbed of her development? Because she couldn't get a job beforehand. I can't actually kind of track the point. Is it meant to be Sylvia is nicer now, and that's why it's the subtext of that is meant to be Sylvia does think of Donna more in the book because now she thinks she can't get a job because she lost what she was like in Series 4.
I kind of feel like the author is actually kind of with Sylvia on that thing. I feel like that's meant to be Sylvia knowing the real reason rather than just Sylvia's delusion. That's the tone I get from this.
But she couldn't keep a job before.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you see, those are facts that we know.
Yeah.
that's a piece of evidence that we actually have. That's an actual real thing, and that simply does not matter here. Okay, that's not that's not relevant in this world.
It also feels like maybe just a weird explanation to explain why Donna doesn't have a job, which is another thing that doesn't need explaining. It's like, oh, it's because of the Metacrisis.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of... I like the Journey's End ending more than, a lot of people, but I think kind of I know you can think the tragedy was like pointless in there, but part of the tragedy is she has regressed. But here it's like, it's kind of framing it more as she's been lessened by losing this Series 4 thing, and now she can't keep a job because she's been lessened. But I thought the implication is more that she's been... In Journey's End, it's that she's regressed into being kind of the worst person she was beforehand. So it's not that she can't keep a job in the 2020s because she's lost her Series 4 magic. It's because she's that person she always was, which was like a failure, I think is more what Journey's End is saying. Whereas I feel like we're kind of convoluting it here. And it's not even really a nice suggestion, but it's not the negative suggestion Journey's End has. It's just kind of a separate negative suggestion. Anyway, an exchange with Rose is quite different in the book. So the bit where Sylvia and Donna are talking to her, Sylvia leaned over and kissed Rose on the cheek. "You look absolutely gorgeous." She smiled at her granddaughter. Rose just grinned widely. Rose just grinned widely, her whole face lighting up at the compliment, and showed Sylvia the boxes. Then blah, blah, blah. Donna saying, "I will descend." Donna let go and opened the back door for Rose. With a huge smile of joy at her mum, Rose scampered off into the garden. That's not how it's played in the episode at all. Rose beaming and smiling and lighting up at all those. Rose looks a little awkward at Sylvia's comment in the episode, or exasperated or something. It's a different expression, which is just kind of interesting.
I dare say stuff like this, kind of small details playing out a bit differently, given that this is this novelisation would have been based on like a script rather than necessarily like a finished episode. I think it's going to be one of those. I think that's. I mean, given how quickly it came out, like on transmission, like a few days after, I feel like this must have been at least in the works.
There's bits of it that are synced up late in the game. I know the weather report isn't in the book, but there is the fact the trial takes place in a car park, whereas we know from the Envision commentary that was originally not going to be a car park. It was going to be like an open bit of land before it got changed.
The underground car park.
The underground car park. So this used to be set on a recreation ground outdoors, and we just could not. It was like a whole night shoot of its own.
There wasn't enough
lot of night shoots, and obviously we were shooting this right in May, June time, so we were only getting sort of 5 or 6 hours of night. So we actually shot this during the day in an underground car park.
14 running around like a maniac in the TARDIS at the end, we know was a Talalay idea during shooting. And those are two things in the book, which like I'm sure the book was sourcing from a script, but there's also stuff here from like decisions made during shooting. So it's not like one of those novelizations which feels like a proto kind of story based on not what happened in the actual filming.
Okay, well, that's fair enough then. I mean, I was just going to say, like, I thought that maybe, like, it could have been a sense of, like, well, what's transitional bits like that, like how Rose leaves the room there, for example, could have been like an author like kind of putting together like what flows logically rather than like referring directly to the episode, if you see what I mean. So, but I mean that's just speculation on my part. I'm saying it's not necessarily like a massive choice on Russell's part. Like I'm fixing this. This was wrong. I'm making it better.
Oh no, it's just when the like acting choices are so different from the book choices, it just kind of stands out. Another Rose thing is Donna might almost have been smiling. Does she look gorgeous? Yes, so stop worrying. Sylvia's mind was full of memories jumbled together, months, no years of therapists and doctors and voice lessons and hormone treatments and learning pronouns and I just get clumsy, she said finally. So we're just seeing inside her mind during that scene. Then this interesting bit, Fudge, who, in the comic is a taller blonde boy and in the episode is a shorter 10-year-old, the book says, Fudge is texting Sharon, who of course in the comic is the one who comes the companion and kind of plays some of the role that Rose does in the episode. So it's like in the book, Sharon's in the canon of the book story off screen and Fudge is like texting Sharon throughout the book that, oh, look at the Wrarth warriors here and look at the aliens and whatnot. So there's Gary Russell's continuity nod. Not much for Sharon to do, but she's around. Then the like extra text at the end of that chapter is a unit memo that's like Kate hiring Shirley. And at the end of it, there's this note which is handwritten. So it's like an image. It's like a JPEG in the ebook. which is addressing Malcolm. Malcolm's from Planet of the Dead. He's the big dork unit guy. Malcolm, if you get a chance, ask Shirley to give you a guided tour of her wheelchair. She's made some amazing augmentations. K.
Amazing how in prose Kate is just as boring as in the actual episode. I would note in the unit memo, so not the note, but during the main text of the thing, there's a mention that Shirley is researching spina bifida, which is the thing that Ruth Madeley has in real life. So that's kind of, I know there was some speculation about does Ruth's character have the same kind of like condition that she has in real life, and I guess this would seem to be a nod that she probably does, or at least Russell assumes she does.
Yeah. Chapter 3 is pretty boring. It's just like exactly the same as the episode, except it gives a little more backstory for Fudge on the street, and the extra text at the end is just an email to Rose, like from like a customer in Dubai about the business.
We have to talk about these inserts right at the end of chapters, because I feel like I've seen this feels like a trite structure for novelizations at this point. It feels like a thing that's done because it's the novelization thing, and we want to spice it up a bit. We want to insert these things to get more of the story, even in cases where they don't actually add much to the story at all. And it just seems odd to me, like this form that the novelization is kind of starting to take almost by default, where you have play-by-play of the episode, then insert a bit from somewhere else in the lore. So here's like an email someone sent, or here's like a note someone wrote, or like a text someone sent. I'm just wondering, like, what this isn't telling the story in a way the story demands. This is just doing things because they're a novelization thing and they're done. I just find it's really weird. I just feel like the structure doesn't seem to come from anywhere or really like do much for the story. It's just frustrating. It feels like another aspect of how these novelizations are kind of becoming a nostalgia project rather than a thing with any actual like drive to them. Does that make sense? Because it just kind of annoys me like irrationally when I see these things getting like slotted in and not really adding that much to the structure.
I like some of the extra texts in here, and some of them just feel like, well, we need 7 because there's 7 chapters.
Yeah,
like these Gary's heart doesn't feel in this Rose email one, whereas his heart really feels in the next one. But yeah, I guess so. You don't like the whole structure of the new targets when they're not by their actual authors, is what you're saying? You feel like it's becoming perfunctory?
Well, I mean, I haven't read many of them, so I don't have like a encyclopedic knowledge of how they tend to be written. But I think like in this case, this feels very familiar. What's being done here, and I mean, I like some of the inserts too. Like the one I think you're probably talking about, I like that one too. But like the ones that feel really perfunctory here, it's like, why are they here? They don't serve a purpose.
So that chapter was the psychedelic sun. Then we go into chapter 4, Hour of the Beast. Stu gets brainwashed as well, so Stu starts working as, the Meeps minion in the Steelworks as well. At this point, it kind of sparked up to me that we keep getting these kind of internal monologue flashbacks of 14, remembering binary, that Donna moment, which is to, kind of set up we'll get to that soon. But basically, binary, 14 remembers that a lot in the book. And then Hour of the Beast chapter ends with one of the extra texts I thought was actually a bit fun, and is totally Gary's thing, because it's like a huge continuity wank. Fun time of trying to lore weld and canon weld things to make sense. So it's Holy Writs and Strictures of the Shadow Proclamation, and in the comic from 1980, the Wrarth Warriors are from like the Galactic Council, of like genetically engineered them to be good cops or whatever. And that comic came out decades before monsters from New Who, and before the Shadow Proclamation and all that. But here, Gary Russell's kind of lore wanked together how to like make New Who stuff work with that same idea of how the Wrarth Warriors got invented. And so it's talking about like the proposal to invent the Wrarth Warriors. And there's one paragraph in there that says, it is proposed that the scholars will distill and then combine traits from 5 powerful species. And then it goes through the species it's taking parts to make the Wrarth Warriors from. And 2 of them I couldn't find any information on, so I think they're just like meant to be new species. But all the rest of them are like species mentioned in the show. So we've got one that was mentioned in the Brain of Morbius, and then we've got the Tritovores from Planet of the Dead. We've got the Warriors of Kudlak, Sarah Jane Adventures guys, and it's like, I guess the idea is Gary's gone and looked for references that make sense, or aliens that look kind of Wrarth Warrior-ish that came after the Wrarth Warriors, and he's like kind of retroactively saying, and this is what they could have been designed from. I just thought that was some fun, like, lore nonsense.
Yeah, it was a nice surprise how naturally the canon welding happens there. Like, because the concept of the Wrath Warriors is basically identical to the comics one, because they are like genetically engineered kind of police force. So just slotting them into the Shadow Proclamation, it just makes sense. Like they fit completely into this whole New Who lore world that RTD created with the Shadow Proclamation. So yeah, it's just quite a nice detail there. I mean, again, I'm not like going crazy for it or anything, but it was a nice bit of stitching.
Yeah. When I first read this bit, I thought it was the kind of like lore wieldy, canon-y, explain-y stuff that I was like not vibing with at all, because I thought Gary Russell had just pulled this all out of nowhere. But then I also did this morning read the comic.
Ooh. And
I realized that it did say like, oh, the Wrarth warriors were genetically engineered from 5 species, and I was like, oh. And then I thought back to this post chapter thing, and I looked at it with new eyes and a fondness for it, because I was like, oh, because now it's a thing that all slots together nicely. Because at first I thought it was just a whole bunch of stuff just made up, like some of the other post chapter things. So it's just a random addition, but yeah. So yeah, this ended up being quite nice.
The next chapter, Revenge of the Wrarth, is exactly the episode, but it ends with another kind of fun extra text thing, which is an article from Galaxipedia on the Galactic Council massacre. And this, like in the ebook, you can like hit the Wikipedia style citations, and it has like a Wikipedia style, citing for it. So that's a bit of fun. And of course, Doctor Who is I don't know how to describe the main Doctor Who wiki. It's a lot. It's where else can you get a sentence like, what, the penis was a human organ that existed from blah, blah, blah. Very bizarre past tense, over-explainy, drama-racked wiki. Anyway, Galactic Council Massacre. And it references the comic again because it says, if you're looking for the song inspired by the event, see Hippity Hop, Boppity Bop, Who's Next for the Chop.
That was fun.
I know Gig and I were annoyed these songs didn't make it into the episode, so it's nice to see Gary shout out the songs. The actual lore it describes in the massacre, I was a little thrown by. It's saying Galactic Council Massacre started big conflicts and started the end of Meep kind, blah blah blah, psychedelic sun made the Meeps evil. They used to be nice and they turned really bad. Galactic Federation sent some leaders to go, what up? And the Meeps killed them and probably cooked them, citation needed. Emergency request to the Shadow Proclamation to bring the Wrarth warriors there. Then, overseen by Judge Scraggs, the Wrarth warriors quickly suppressed the entire planet and placed it under martial law. Tragically and unforeseen by all the experts behaviorists, on the night now referred to as Psychedelia Mors Voluntaria, the entire population of Meep kind simultaneously induced myocardial infarction and in less than 5 standard space minutes committed self-inflicted genocide. Rumours persist that a number of Meep kind may have become mercenaries and soldiers of fortune after escaping the planet moments before the myocardial incident occurred, including the most high beep of all the Meeps, but these reports have never been substantiated. Did that happen in the comic, that Meeps all killing themselves because the Wraths came?
No.
Yeah.
It's not even true to the episode. I mean, the episode that the Wraths talk about how we fought them across the stars. It was a long and hard battle, blah, 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 blah. So, no, this is completely unfamiliar, what we're reading here. Okay, so they suppressed the planet in, quickly, and then all the Meeps just committed collective suicide. Like, what? That's a complete invention. This was like the sort of random thing that, the Big Finish adaptation randomly inserted, introducing random, communist parallels or whatever. This was a complete random invention. This doesn't even comply with the text of the episode that it's based on. So yeah, very weird and kind of rubbish change there, if I'm honest.
The last footnote there is a very wiki-ish semantic thing, which is specifying Beep was a title, a rank, not an individual's name. Means vicious warlord, blah, blah, blah. It's translated from Old Meep, glorious leader whose job it is to be the most perfectly round, like planets, moons, suns, cake.
This is like the Star Beast equivalent of on my planet it means hope.
Chapter 6, Countdown to Apocalypse, has it ends with text between Sharon and Fudge. And also, so that has the, resolution of Donna, Metacrisis, all that sort of thing. There's no binary moment in there. Non-binary is not in the book at all.
Yeah, see, this bit is the bit I was most curious about how the novelisation would handle it, because that whole sequence in the episode felt a little bit constructed in the editing suite kind of thing, where especially that non-binary moment, it felt very much like, okay, how do we make what we have make sense? So I was wondering how would the novelisation approach trying to make more sense of it, and the answer is just it doesn't really. It just pretty much transcribes it. Obviously it leaves out the non-binary bit, but it just plays out the whole kind of random explanation for Rose remembering Metacrisis stuff, and yeah, you don't get a whole lot of insight into what was going on. And come a little bit later, when Rose has that "I'm finally me after all these years" moment, that whole sequence, it's like, it's transcribed with like no attempt to get into the characters' heads at all, and it's always really, really jarring when that happens, because at different points in this novelisation you get Sylvia's internal monologue, you get 14's internal monologue, all kinds of stuff. So when you have a passage where, like, for quite an extensive period of time, there's just none of that, and there's just describing physical actions, like, oh, Donna puffed away a bit of the regeneration energy that was floating by. Like, God, who cares? You know, it's like a siren going off. Like, okay, the author gave up for this bit here. The author had no idea how to like enrich this bit at all.
Yeah, that's just what I thought. It was just like it was not a refusal to engage with this moment for whatever reason, which is annoying because it's the most interesting moment for the novelisation to get into.
Yeah, and then we go to the last chapter 7. Here we go again. That starts with Stu Ferguson had mentioned to the doctor that he wondered if he'd still have a job by this afternoon, but the doctor said he'd make sure that word got back to the owners that he was the company's hero. Without Stu aiding the authorities so ably, the steelworks would be just a big crater in the ground. Yeah, just let it go and I'm finally me. Yeah, that's the same as the episode, so there's no real insights there. Doctor running around the TARDIS like crazy. That's a Talay idea from Shooting, so that's interesting. Then this bit is an interesting interaction with Series 4. So I really do remember the doctor said finally, still trying out new controls every second with you. And I'm so glad you're back because it killed me, Donna. It killed me, it killed me. He finally looked at her and stopped playing. It killed me. If she hadn't been holding the coffee, she would have hugged him. He looked so wounded, so apologetic. She knew it wasn't his fault. It had never been his fault. He had done what he did to save her life, and she could never criticize that, only be grateful.
Boo. Boo. I hate this.
I feel that level of, like, author, almost like mouthpiece kind of thing is just so unnecessary. Like, God, it's really didactic. Like, God, you don't actually need to have a character explain, like, your views on how to view this story and what's the right way to view the story. It's like, come on, like, God, it's just... I just don't want to... it's just too frustrating to actually form sentences about.
It reminds me of when, after Power of the Doctor aired, and there was the horrific scene of Ace forgiving the hologram of the Seventh Doctor. I remember a lot of people were arguing, like, in a way where they would be like, oh, it's like if Donna came back and forgave 10. That's how it feels. And this is like, it's exactly what happens right here. It's just, what a choice.
It's really frustrates. You don't need to fix that moment.
Yeah.
Like, I get that some people hate the Journey's End ending and some people think it's, really negative, but like they like the drama or melodrama of it. But either way, I think the weirdest approach is it's a great moment and it's a good thing. And the Doctor did a good thing. Like, that's not the show itself moved past that, in series 9 and maybe even earlier, honestly. So I don't really know who's that meant to please exactly that. Actually, like, what is the point of these 60th specials at all, really, in a way, if there was nothing wrong with series 4? Which is kind of what that's suggesting.
Yeah.
That he didn't do anything wrong. It's just kind of melodrama for melodrama's sake, even more than the ending already was then. I think you're kind of making the ending worse and less interesting if you make it that he didn't even do anything wrong. That's one of the good bits of drama you can mine out of it, is what if he did do a bit wrong there?
It's a very odd instinct to try and neutralise conflict and controversy and dilemmas that happened and just go, everything was fine, you don't need to think about it anymore. Like, surely you want people to be thinking about stories and, questioning them and debating them, like, rather than just having them be finished and flattened.
It's not very Donna either, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Even if Donna, even if we accept the premise that she would have straight up died, there was no way around it, he had to do it, it's still, would she be happy about it? No, she'd still be like that. I hate that happened. I don't read this as her going, well, it was a wise move. I must approve. That doesn't ring as Donna-ish at all to me. But the book overall, I didn't dislike it like Missy did. It's a pretty perfunctory thing, like I think Gig has suggested throughout. But I thought it was a nice enough little way to go through. I mean, these take 3 hours to read. They're very short books to read. They're just a nice little jaunt. Like, I don't have a huge. I don't really dislike the book or anything. There are a couple of little things in there I liked that we went through. Ultimately, I just don't feel like it's a huge deal either way, apart from the kind of interesting thing of it coming out within days of the episode. That's kind of fun, but yeah.
I mean, the release thing, I think that's worth kind of questioning, because like the whole concept of churning them out like the same week as transmission, right? So there's no time between the episode and the actual novelisation for things to sit at all. I mean, recently I read Peter Harness's novelisation of Zygon Inversion, and that is so blatantly informed by like the time that has passed since that episode aired, since it had its reputation, and the author having had time to sit with it, think about criticisms of it, and think, how can I like make this better? How can I respond to ways in which this episode maybe could have like done better or been more interesting, or just cover a bit more? And I think like what was so cool when the target range was revived was that we were getting opportunities to look back at old episodes like with a slightly new lens, and that has now been scrapped, because it seems like moving forward we're just going to be getting these novelizations churned out pretty much as soon as the episodes are like airing.
That's a great point.
And it seems like an effort to try and resurrect the way the novelizations, I guess, used to work. Which, I mean, they wouldn't necessarily come out the same week as the episode or whatever, but they were an effort to just kind of just go alongside the TV show, just supplement them, because there wasn't like VHSs and rewatching back then. So there was not so much of this idea of like the novelizations being incredibly writerly revisitings of the story, but rather just we're getting these out as like an alternative pipeline for content, if you like. And it seems like the novelizations are trying to go back to that now, just as an effort to resurrect what was really kind of an out-of-date format, I think. It's really odd, and it's just strange, because we had something interesting and better with the revival of this range, and now we're just regressing for reasons that I can only assume are some kind of desire for simulacra of the magical moments with the original novelizations. Because when young fans of Classic Who would pick these up, and they'd get into reading through these novelizations by like Terry Nation and stuff, and those are really positive, informative experiences for a lot of people. And it seems now there's this nostalgia for that we want to try and resurrect by making the target novelizations just as they were back then, so just as perfunctory, and not even necessarily by the author of the original episodes frequently, and just kind of often just kind of being a play-by-play of episodes a lot of the time. And I'm really skeptical of the whole thing, because it's just like, what is this like nostalgia exercise? Like, what is this actually for? Like, if we're not actually that interested in the content of these books anymore, like, what are they for? What is the goddamn point?
Yeah, no, that's perfectly right. I agree very much.
We'll always have Day of the Doctor. And Rose, a new version of Rose came out this year with drawings.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's not implausible that they could get like more Who writers to look at some of their old episodes again, and we could get more good ones. But yeah, I feel like these RTD2 era ones, and ones for Shooty, I assume, risk being kind of write-offs, to be honest, in terms of actually significance.
I don't think they're necessarily bad books. Like, I have liked some of them, and I like this one well enough, but I think if they're not written by the episode's writer, I know lots of the classic ones weren't either, and that didn't always mean they were like, what's the word, like minimal or uninteresting exactly. But for these new ones, if it's not by the writer, I think they're going to feel very living in the boundaries a little bit, and I'm just not that. I'm excited when it's the original author, one way or the other, because then I think, is it going to be the kind of reassessment, like Gig was saying, which can be really interesting. But if they're not by the original author, and if they come out so soon after that they can't react to the response to the episode, it does kind of feel like we've gone beyond DVDs now. Like, DVDs are outdated. Like, the need for a novelization to come out soon after an episode is beyond outdated. It's quite odd. Wild Blue Yonder is getting a novel by Mark Morris, who's...
Is he anyone? Has he done stuff?
He's done some EU things. He's not like a huge figure like Gary, and he's not like a somewhat celebrated writer like James Goss, who's doing Maker of Toys, but we'll see how that goes. I am looking forward to James Goss's Giggle novel, because Goss, love him and hate him, because he has plenty of varied stories, but he is an actual writer at the end of the day. So, and he's written some fun Who novels, so I'm interested to see how he handles that. So we've talked everything Star Beast then. Episode, extras, novel. Are you ready for Wild Blue Yonder?
Very. More than ready. Readier than maybe a lot of fans, actually, because I'm not expecting Matt Smith to show up.
I'm on the edge of my seat, you could say. Yes, so that well and truly wraps up our talking about the Star Beast, the episode, the extras to the episode, the novelization of the episode. We've talked through it. Let us know what you thought of everything we talked about here, or anything we talked about here. Anything in the episode, the novel, the extras, the comic, whatever. We'd love to hear your thoughts. It's a big time. It's the 60th anniversary. What do you think of all this stuff? And as always, thanks a lot for listening. Cheers.